Oops. Everybody. I'm just going to grab some water. I'll be right back. We'll let people join. So we're going to start at 5 after, just so people know. I like to give a 5-minute grace period for everybody to join. If anyone has specific questions that they want to ask preliminarily that I can touch on in the presentation portion, like we're going to do, I'll do a presentation of, it'll sort of be a conversation, but I'm going to present sort of a, as mentioned in the meetup group, a perspective on determinism of what I've learned about it since studying free will for quite a bit of time. I wrote the paper on free will like over a decade ago, and so I'll basically present an opinion, and and basically we'll have a conversation about that, and people can question and debate along the way. So it'll be very interactive, hopefully. Usually is. I will also post the online community in the chat for anyone that wants to see the papers that I'm going to be screen sharing. I'm just going to be using them as like a guideline, and I'll screen share as I walk through the arguments and perspectives. If you want to join the online community and see you'll be able to log into the papers yourselves. You're all welcome to add questions and comments along the way in the papers that I'm posting. Couple of questions, and yes, totally fine to listen. Peter, it'll be a presentation with discussion. And so I'll be presenting a perspective, but it'll be a discussion, and people are allowed to question and debate along the way. And anyone's welcome to disagree with anything I present, and then we have a little conversation about it. And then, we may not get consensus, and if we don't, that's okay. We just keep moving forward. But I like to keep it very interactive, and so let me. Thank you, Sue. I will post the link to the community now, and then the papers are actually in the online community in the reference channel. And so the community is done through software called Discord. Don't be fooled by the name. It's actually very organized. It just takes a little getting used to in terms of user experience. Maybe I'll give a quick introduction to Discord now. Actually, while it is 5 after, but I'm going to do a quick introduction to Discord so that people know how to access the papers if they want to. So when you join Discord, this is the Freethinker Institute Discord session. And so when you join it, I clearly am in a lot of communities, but the Freethinker Institute is the one with the thinker. I think I saw someone had that icon in the chat, if I remember right. Who was it? Didn't we have someone with a thinker? Yeah, we do, Carl. So famous guy, right? The thinker guarding the gates of hell. And so basically, if you go to, I believe it's under on the left are basically the different topics that we talk about in the online community. And if someone has a topic that they're interested in that isn't there, or you don't feel like fits into anything, you can put that into how we can improve under suggestions at the bottom. And then references where I post papers, and other people are welcome to post articles and references. And so you'll see on determinism and the argument in defense of free will. And so I'm going to kind of kick things off now, because I think we've given people enough time to join, and it's 7 after. And so what I'll say is that I'm going to present first an argument against determinism, this coming from the perspective of me having grown up and been, for the first 20-something years of my life, a determinist atheist. I have since, I believe, proven myself wrong, but you guys will use your own judgment about whether or not my argument is accurate. That's a part of the whole philosophy of the Freethinker Institute, is that everyone should think for themselves. So I'm not going to expect you to be convinced unless you're convinced of your own free will. But I'll try to make a good argument for determinism actually being false. And actually, it's a little bit impolite, and I don't mean to offend anyone in the way that I present this, but when I came to some of these realizations, it kind of made me realize that actually, like, they're I think defensible, like logically defensible. And I'll basically I'll walk you through what I mean by that. But we really want to have an open, honest dialogue here. And like, as I said before, like, I'm going to present an argument first against determinism and why I think determinism has been more or less all but completely disproven by science. And I'll also explain the one loophole through which determinism could still exist. And some people may believe in that, but then I'm going to present an argument for free will, which I haven't had anyone be able to punch a hole in, since I put it together. But anyone's welcome to try, and I would welcome that. I'm totally not like biased towards thinking that determinism or free will is either good or bad. I don't think either one of them is good or bad, and you can be a good or bad person whether you believe in determinism or free will. And so I don't think this is really, in most respects, this conversation is more of an academic conversation, because even out of the majority of determinists, out of a philosophy survey that was done, the majority of determinists are actually compatibilists, which means that they believe in free will and determinism. So they more or less act like we have free will, even though they think we don't, in my perspective. And so that said, this is more of an academic conversation, and I tend to focus on the practical, but I do think that there are actually practical implications in terms of if we have free will, we really do make decisions, we really can improve our lives in a way that our effort matters. And that's what I'm going to try to end with if we have time. And if we don't, then we'll save it for another night. But I want to talk about how strong I think the will is. And I actually think it's incredibly strong. It can be, but it's one of those things that I like to joke that you only have free will if you believe you have free will, because if you don't believe you have free will, you essentially cede your free will to randomness. And so, that jokes aside, let me go into the case against determinism and remind everybody, like, feel free to raise your hand. People are welcome to talk over me, but most people prefer raising their hand. But like, I don't mind if people talk over me. Like, I want you guys to ask questions and make this interactive. I will try, this paper is less logically organized than the next one. And so please forgive me for that. But normally I do presentations, but in this case, like, it's a little bit, I think it's better to have the paper for reference, because I've gotten a lot of questions that I've answered and I've clarified in the papers. And so I think it's good to be able to have the details available. That said, I'm going to try to walk through the argument logically. And so first of all, I want to define determinism, which is basically that the past and future are determined by the laws of nature, which most people consider synonymous with the laws of physics. Not everybody does, but for the argument's sake, I'm going to assume that that's more or less what people mean, because most perspectives of determinism say that there only is one possible future, meaning, like, when we think we're making a decision, there's only one possible thing we can do. And so the laws of physics are really deciding what we're going to do. And what I'm going to try to make the argument of, and this is the part that's not super polite, is that determinists actually believe in the laws of physics in the same way medieval man believed in God, which is in omniscience and omnipotence. And I'm going to try to make an argument for that. Again, it's just something that I kind of came to the realization. I was like, wow, is this really true? But basically, the laws of nature is basically everything impacting the physical universe. And so there are a few loophole philosophies that can violate these rules, and people are welcome to bring them up if they're important to you. That said, basically, if you're a determinist, you basically see the laws of physics as the only sort of paradigm for creating the future, right? The only thing that influences the future is the laws of physics. And therefore, all power in the universe is in the hands of the laws of physics. And those laws of physics interact with all of the physical universe simultaneously. And so while the laws of physics, and some people criticize this argument of omnipotence and omniscience, saying, well, the laws of physics aren't sentient. Well, they don't need to be in order to meet the definitions of omnipotent or omniscient. Omnipotent just means having very great or unlimited authority or power. And I think all of the power that is possible to exist is very great power, right? That's a lot of power. So it meets that definition of omnipotent. And of course, omniscient just means like presence everywhere and aware of everything. Well, the laws of physics, are interacting with mass energy everywhere in the universe simultaneously. So if anything is, aware of anything in the universe that we know about through cause and effect, it would be the laws of physics. Now, maybe there's a God and maybe he's omnipotent too, but certainly the law of physics would need to be omnipotent or omniscient, because they need to be aware of all the mass energy in the universe at a single moment in time in order to make the next moment in time come about. And so what I would argue is that this belief in determinism actually is sort of tantamount to believing in the laws of physics being omniscient and omnipotent. And so the other thing, and I get into this a little bit later, is I'm going to get into the scientific argument a little later. Sorry for the slight digression, but I also want to say that I mentioned compatibilism, and I guess for me, compatibilism is a little bit hard to reconcile because the idea of free will to me means that we're free to make a decision. But if the laws of physics are really the ones making the decision, our decision isn't free, right? Because it's decided for us by the laws of physics. So there's no free and free will if determinism is true, which for me means that compatibilism isn't really like I can't logically reconcile how someone can think of both determinism and free will at the same time. I think the reason that there are so many people that believe in compatibilism, which by the way, the majority of philosophers are compatibilists. So I'm in a very small minority, and I'm a hobbyist philosopher. I'm in a very small minority of people that have well thought out perspectives here that believe in libertarian free will. So I get like I'm a minority here, but I'm going to try to make a good logical argument for it nonetheless. And basically, because of that lack of compatibility with like freedom of free will, I kind of don't really think that compatibilism makes sense. The reason I think it's so popular, just to get back to that for a second, is that science, as I mentioned in the intro to the meetup, science has made huge advancements, especially since the Enlightenment. And science is really the study of determinism. It's the study of reproducible cause and effect. And I would say, like the vast majority of progress in the last 500 years. Now, there's been some great philosophical progress, and I would say utilitarianism added a ton of value, and a bunch of other things philosophically added value. But like, let's admit that science has done incredible things over the last 500 years. And so I think people just naturally think science has the answer to everything. And we had a meetup a couple of weeks ago about how religion and science religion, spirituality, etc., can be compatible with science. And we use the same argument or the same theorem that I use in my paper on free will, which is Gödel's Incompleteness theorem, which I'll get into later tonight, to argue that actually they're compatible and they're complementary. And so what I'm going to say is that science has added a ton of value in the last 500 years. I'm a hard scientist myself. I was a computer science major, but I would just say that there's more to the world than just science and deterministic cause and effect. And actually that brings me to a common misperception and a common argument, a common misperception that makes people vote in favor of determinism. And I'm gonna just touch on this quickly, but it's a really deep and important subject because a lot of like famous people fall prey to this argument. And what they say is that if there's cause and effect, determinism must be true. And because cause and effect is deterministic, you can basically trace back all of the current moments, cause and effects all the way back to the beginning of the Big Bang, and everything was decided at the Big Bang. The problem is that assumes deterministic cause and effect is the only cause and effect that exists. And a lot of people go under that assumption, and I've never seen any of the people who make this argument try to make a logical reason that all cause and effect has to be deterministic. And in fact, I don't think there is one because I don't think it is. And I'm going to go into the scientific reason now, which relates to something called Bell's theorem. What Bell's theorem showed us, and this is why I say science is all but disproven determinism, because Bell's theorem, you can look it up in Wikipedia here. It was fascinating when I learned about this. Basically, he explores something called hidden variables. And a lot of people with determinist beliefs say, well, we can't really understand why, a certain thing happens, but it is a deterministic cause and effect. It's just we don't understand what the actual cause and effect relationship is between the causes and the effect. And so they say it's just too complicated for us to understand, and therefore, but it is happening. It's happening, trust me, but it's too complicated to understand. Well, what Bell's theorem does is it says anything in what's called locality, and by the way, locality, like a local variable, he studies what's called local hidden variables. And essentially what this means is that a local variable, by the way, is anything within the distance of two entangled particles. And for those that don't know, particles have been entangled from outer space down to Earth's surface. So when we talk about local hidden variables, we're talking about anything like as far as like upper atmosphere and closer. And what Bell's theorem says, and he logically proved this, is that the deterministic cause and effect cannot be explained even by variables that we have no knowledge of, no comprehension of. They're simply like unable to be explained. The deterministic or the seemingly random effects of quantum mechanics can't be explained by local variables, even variables that we don't know. And he's not even saying what the variables are or any of that. He's just saying there are no variables that could possibly exist within that space that can account for what we perceive in quantum mechanics, which is, perceived randomness. I'm going to try to make an argument in the next part of the conversation that randomness actually includes some free will. But that said, that's what Bell's theorem says, and people are welcome to like fact check me on all this. It's very interesting. This Scientific American argument talks about how China was basically the one that got the quantum the entanglement in space and the distance there. So now, if you're gonna believe in determinism, what you're basically saying at this point, with accepted science, right? Bell's theorem is accepted science, and I haven't heard of anyone that has disproven Bell's theorem in any way, shape, or form, or even cracked a hole in it. If anyone hears of something like that when they fact check this, please reach out to me through the online community, through Meetup, whatever. But I haven't heard of anything. And if that's true, then the only way you can believe in determinism now is that the seemingly subatomic randomness is actually caused not by anything closer than outer space, but only by stuff that is further away than outer space, and it does so deterministically, which is a really hard pill to swallow for me. That probably would have convinced me that determinism was super unlikely before I had my paper on free will, but I came up with the paper, after I came up with the the anti-determinism argument after coming up with the paper on free will. So any questions about the argument on determinism or against determinism, I guess?
Are you saying that there's nothing outside the four-dimensional space-time world?
So
Is
no, I'm coming at it from a perspective of like, so like that becomes a super super complicated question, right? Because then there's string theory and their theory on higher dimensions. I have my own theory on higher dimensions, and a lot of people, there are a number of competing theories. The question is whether or not in physical cause and effect. Now you can believe in metaphysical cause and effect, or metaphysical um, things are causing cause and effect. And that's why I said in the beginning, this is kind of an anti-physicalist determinist argument. So if is that what you're getting at? Is like non-physical cause?
well, well, mind, consciousness
Right.
is not in the four-dimensional space-time world. The four-dimensional space-time world, our perception of it shows up within mind. So mind is not, it's outside the four-dimensional space-time world, right?
Right. So I would agree with you. I think physicalists would say all mind is a bunch of neurons firing in a brain with chemicals. And so I think the physicalists would disagree with us. I would agree with you that mind is independent and metaphysically oriented. And that's what I'm going to make an argument for in the next section. Um, but yeah, I'm more or less arguing against a physicalist view of determinism, or a strictly like cause and effect view of determinism, like deterministic cause and effect. Seamus,
Hey, what's up, Garrett? How you doing?
good to see you.
You hear me? Yeah, man. Sorry. So actually, the person who just prior spoke to me took what I was going to say was, I just want to make sure I have this right if I bring up a point later, which is consciousness. I guess to simplify it a bit, determinism is that there's all events are previously existing because cause and effect, and at some minute level, there's a beginning to it, and it just kind of goes on and on and on, and that's that.
So determinism says that it's deterministically cause and effect, meaning the cause and effect
Sure.
only determined by the laws
A
of
cause B,
nothing
cause
else.
C, yeah.
So Brent's point is, well, what about mind? If mind is a metaphysical thing, maybe it can influence the physical universe in non-deterministic ways. And I'm going to argue Brent is absolutely right, and I have a really good argument proving him right, in my opinion. But anyone's welcome to try to shoot holes in that argument. So does that make sense?
Yeah, I want to get into that a little later, because it's
Yeah.
obviously determinism and consciousness are very interesting, because we can all thought experiment a world where humans never existed, and then we wonder if any of this shit mattered in the first place,
Right.
about cause and effect, but also just even the law, what we call laws of physics and everything else can be described as appearances in consciousness. And you control your thoughts and where they come from and where they go next. And anyway, there's a lot of rich stuff there, so how that factors into determinism, but I'm not going to junk up the whole beginning of it with a huge consciousness argument right
That's
now.
okay. Yeah, we're actually going to have another conversation on consciousness, and I might touch on it at the end if people want me to. I have like a hypothesis on consciousness and how it works mechanically, and sort of metaphysically, and so we can touch on that at the end if people are interested. Just remind me at the end. But we're going to have a conversation with a group of us that are kind of collaborating on the Freethinker Institute, where we'll have like a conversation on consciousness. So that's coming up in the next couple of months. Chris.
Yeah, Garrett, I joined a couple of minutes late. So I just want to understand. So when you talk about, the determinism doesn't exist or is wrong, you're talking about like a universal determinism, right? Like everything had to be within the determinist model. Is that what you're saying?
So all of the types of determinism that I think that argument works against are everything other than what's called adequate determinism. And adequate determinism actually leaves the room open for there being free will anyway. So I don't worry about that version of determinism. But the main thing that I'm trying to say in the paper on determinism is that cause and effect is not always deterministic, and there's not only one possible future. There are actually multiple possible futures, and that ultimately what this argument, the next argument is going to try to show is that our will can determine which future we experience.
Yeah, I think, okay. I think you are talking about universal determinism. And also, even if you have multiple outcomes, they can still be deterministic, right? It just happened to be, like, is that outcome, whether it's 1 or 10, has been predetermined? That's really the question, versus the number of outcome it has. And the second thing I think too, I think you talk about the relationship between randomness and free will. I'm not, I mean, there's a relation, but I'm not sure you can equate it, because one, you really have to define randomness, right? Is randomness really randomness, or just because we terminate randomness because we don't understand the cause and the effect relationship, right?
That's what the Bell's theorem basically shows, is that quantum fluctuations are either true randomness, or they are deterministically defined by things further away than outer space, but not deterministically defined by things closer than outer space, which again, I think is a hard pill to swallow. To answer your question about determinism, I have not heard of a version of determinism that allows for multiple possible futures that I can recall. If you have one, feel free to put it in the online community or send it to me in Meetup or in the online community. I'd love to hear about it. But all of my understanding of determinism is that there's really only one possible future. Now, there might have been 5 possibilities, 4 of which were impossible to actually have happen, which we perceived that they could happen. But determinism says only one of those things is going to happen, whether we like it or not, no matter what. And it's the laws of physics that determine that possible future.
Yeah, I wasn't really going to attach onto the physics much, because that it gets really confusing. We go into the rabbit hole. No, I was really on the point where I agree with you on the definition of randomness. My issue really is that, even if you have randomness, having free will, which you may very possibly have, are 2 little different things, right? Because having randomness, you need randomness for free will, but to have the free will, you need agency. So they're a little different.
They are different, and I'm going to address the distinction there a little bit later in the conversation, if that's okay, Chris, because I have that in the paper on free will, is okay. Like randomness and free will, and why I think let me address that later, if that's all right. James,
Garrett,
go ahead.
Can you please just define free will, the way you're talking about it?
Yeah, so let me write it here. I'll put it up on the screen, and I'm going to so that you can read it. I have a specific definition of free will that I created, and it is consistent with the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy definition, but it's a little more precise in my opinion. And so this is the definition of free will that I am arguing for. So James, let me let you ask the question while Brent can read this.
Yeah, are you also refuting Sam Harris's?
Yes. And in fact, Sam Harris,
determinism.
Yes, and in fact, Sam Harris's argument was the one that I politely said assumes deterministic cause and effect rather than proving deterministic cause and effect. And if you assume deterministic cause and effect, yes, everything is deterministic and everything traces back to the Big Bang. But he didn't, I have not seen Sam Harris, and I read his paper on free will, and I did not see anywhere where he actually made an argument for why we should believe that cause and effect is always deterministic. If you know of one, feel free, if you read better than I did, I looked for it because that's what I was looking for in his paper, but I didn't see it anywhere.
Also, if you assume that that randomness somehow allows for free will, does that mean that even though you don't understand what that randomness is, right?
So let's
it is still
randomness versus free will for a little later. I want to make that argument, but I want to make it after making the arguments that I have to make first to sort of logically, I think, refute determinism in a more coherent way that also removes the possibility for, I think it's called superdeterminism, which is the belief that particles further out than space are deterministically impacting the universe. So if you don't mind, I'm just going to suggest that if I haven't answered that by the end of the night, I'm very sure that I will, but if I haven't, let me know a little bit later if you don't mind if I punt on that one.
So the question, are you recording this and will
Yes.
this be on YouTube?
We will. Yes.
Okay.
We have a YouTube channel, and so all of this will be recorded, and all of our sessions of the Free Thinker Institute are recorded and put up on YouTube afterwards.
Okay.
You're going to be famous.
I don't know that I'll be famous, but you know, maybe someone's going to make a comment that will make them famous. But if my argument for free will is right, I think it's very meaningful and impactful, and you guys will be the judge on whether or not you think it's right. I think it is. I'm convinced, and I've had a lot of people try to prove me wrong, and it actually has resulted in a lot of improvements to the paper, because people will point out things that I didn't explain well enough that for me, I just logically jumped from A to C, and they said, well, what about B? And so now the paper is fairly robust. And so I think it's a pretty good argument, but again, you guys have to be the judge. Mike.
I looked at your paper, and several others here have written papers on the subject. I've looked at Meacham's paper. The thing that I get out of this is that, like Gödel, you mentioned Bell, and I'll bring in Gödel, that you can't prove this from within the system, so to speak, that it's incomplete. So we for sure have the illusion that we have free will. I know, despite Leibniz paper and others, I feel I have free will. Right. But one of the things that's still open to me is the opposite of determinism is chaos or randomness. And the opposite of free will is not determinism, but might be considered coercion. So and by some evil demon, as Descartes talked about it. So I just wonder if with all the papers on the subject seem to from their tautology come to a ironclad conclusion that they're right and the rest of the world is wrong, but you can't convince the other camp, and that's been true in a lot of logic that we've addressed in all these things. So I'm interested in how this goes today in that context. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate that. And I'm going to try to make an argument that free will is very compatible with the laws of physics and operates within the laws of physics. And so it's not so much chaos, really. There's a common argument is, if I had free will, then I could fly. Well, no one is saying we all have omnipotence, right? Which is like, I can just decide to fly. And so that's like a straw man argument against free will that I think is a little silly, and I don't think anyone here would make, but I just want to address it to say that all I'm saying within free will is this, and this is a good lead in, Mike, to the definition of determinism, is that a being's conscious effort makes one of multiple possible outcomes more likely to be experienced by that being. And so it is coming from the perspective of a sentient being, and this sentient being has, as was presented, there might be 6 options, and the sentient being's will can non-deterministically determine one of those outcomes to be more likely than the other. So it's a very light definition of free will, but it's one that sort of shatters determinism if I can logically prove it. And I will later go into why I think free will is, that's a very, when I say a light definition, it doesn't give the will a lot of power, right? It says it's got some semblance of wiggle room, nothing more. But I'm going to argue later that we actually do have a lot of power with our will if we use it correctly. And I don't know if we'll have time for that today, but we'll see if we do, and if we do, we'll get there. So thanks for your comments, Mike. And is the definition, and it's really essentially a definition, but it's a little more specific than the definitions that I saw when I researched libertarian free will. And I intentionally chose it because that's what I'm proving true, rather than, and so let me start into the argument. So first is just proving that formal logic is sound. This is more of a formality, so I'm not going to go into it in a lot of detail. The more important point is that Gödel's incompleteness theorem. So I want to do a quick introduction of Gödel's incompleteness theorem, and for this I'm going to use this funny site. They have a really good explanation. Rudy Rucker does the best explanation, and basically I'm going to summarize this. And basically the idea is, and I when I first learned about Gödel's incompleteness theorem in a 400 level computer science class, it immediately struck me that it was going to disprove my belief in determinism. And I said, Gödel is wrong. I'm going to prove him wrong. And I went about trying to prove him wrong. And I studied Gödel's incompleteness theorem, and I was like, well, I guess I was wrong. So here's the argument that Gödel made. And basically the idea is, let's assume we have something called a universal truth machine, right? And the universal truth machine is a machine that is always right. Every question you ask it, it will answer it with 100% accuracy. We're going to assume that we have such a machine, and we're going to come to a contradiction where it turns out that that machine is not so capable as we assumed that it was. And so let's take that as universal truth machine, and we're going to ask it a question. And we're going to say to this universal truth machine, the universal truth machine will never say this statement is true. Well, if the universal truth machine says the statement is true, then, and you can follow through the logic, if the universal truth, if the universal truth machine says the statement is true, then it actually turns out that the universal truth machine was wrong, because clearly the universal truth machine said that statement was true, but the statement says that it'll never say that it's true. So the statement proves the universal truth machine wrong in that case. Well, what if the universal truth machine says the statement is false? Then wait, and let me make sure I have the logic right. So, so if the universal truth machine says that the statement is false, then the statement is actually true, but the universal, because the universal truth machine never said that that statement was true, but then, you know, the universal truth machine is wrong because the statement actually was true and the universal truth machine said the statement was false. Now, when I first learned this, and so you can tell that this is a statement that even the perfect black box could never answer correctly. And what I would argue is it's a class of problems. It's not just like this, you know, semantic thing. It's actually a meaningful mathematical class of problems, and it comes up in mathematics itself. And basically the idea is self-defining statements are the logical class of problems. And I've tried to think of a good name for them, and probably someone has one out there that I haven't been able to find when I researched. But self-defining problems basically can't be logically proven by what's called a consistent knowledge base. And so what Gödel's incompleteness theorem shows is that there are really two types of knowledge base, right? There's a consistent knowledge base where everything you prove true is true and it's accurate. But then there are things that are not true, that are also true, that your consistent, logically consistent knowledge base. Well, I'm going into a digression. I'm not gonna go there, but that was more important for the science and spirituality one. But let me just say that no universal truth machine exists. It is impossible for it to exist logically, according to Gödel's incompleteness theorem, in any formal system which contains Robinson arithmetic. And Robinson arithmetic is more or less basic arithmetic. You can look it up. I have a link here for it. Well, you can just Google that. I don't have a link for Robinson arithmetic, but you can look it up. It's like, it's very clear that, you know, you can like have that somewhere in the universe, there's enough physical evidence that you can recreate Robinson arithmetic from mass energy in the universe in different ways. So it's pretty clear that the universe contains Robinson arithmetic, and that's important for the argument that I'm going to make in a little bit. So now I'm going to do something here that a lot of people get lost on this step. So please ask questions if it's unclear for you, because this is where I'm using a thing called problem transformation that we use in computer science, where I take one type of problem and I turn it into another type of problem. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the the physical state of the universe at time t, which is like right now is called time t, and then time t plus delta t is like the next moment in time, like a Planck length of time in the future, basically. And so it's the next, tiny little moment in time. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, let's assume that the laws of physics, as determinism assumes, let's assume the laws of physics are a perfect black box that understands everything about the universe at this moment in time and can answer every question about the universe in the next moment in time. And what I'm going to say and what I'm going to phrase as the question is there mass energy at this specific, location, down to like a square Planck length of mass energy, which is the smallest length that is measurable. Let's get even smaller. Let's just get infinitesimally small. There's no reason to limit it. But let's say that the laws of physics themselves, we're going to ask this black box, which I'm calling the laws of physics, what is the state of a singular minuscule point in space at the next moment in time? And the question, we're going to ask an infinite number of questions, or according to scientists, the universe is finite. I would have an argument that the universe is infinite, but I'm with the Greeks on that. But let's assume the universe is finite. It doesn't matter, it could be infinite too, but say either way. Say every point in space in mass energy right now, we take the laws of physics and we ask the laws of physics, what will be the case at the next moment in time? And so that is the question that we're going to ask the laws of physics. And when we ask the laws of physics that question, throughout the entire universe, whether it's infinite or finite, doesn't matter. We ask it throughout the entire universe. Well, if determinism is right, then the laws of physics will perfectly and accurately be able to answer every single one of those questions about the entire universe, right? And so in doing so, we've basically proven determinism right because the laws of physics give a perfect answer for the next moment in time, except for the fact that Gödel has shown us that no such perfect black box exists if the system contains Robinson arithmetic, which the entire universe clearly contains Robinson arithmetic because we've conceived of Robinson arithmetic in the universe. So, clearly Robinson arithmetic is contained in the entire universe. So that limits the entire universe to the same limitations that Gödel's incompleteness theorem shows, which means the laws of physics themselves have the same limitation that Gödel's incompleteness theorem shows, which means the laws of physics themselves can't perfectly and accurately predict the next moment in time. And that's really the logical argument against determinism. Is anyone unclear on that? Because this is like complicated and I get it. And I'm trying to simplify this part of the paper because I lose a lot of people here. So I like this forum because you can ask questions if it's unclear. And it would help me probably in my paper to hear what questions people have. So if you have a question, I bet you 5 other people have it. So please don't hesitate to ask.
You said something about something is in the universe and it was some kind of mathematics. You said it was in the universe?
Robinson arithmetic. So
Robinson arithmetic.
Yeah.
Well, didn't that come out of his mind?
So theoretically, according to the physicalist perspective on determinism, and yes, Robinson arithmetic as a concept someone created, but if you look up Robinson arithmetic, it's pretty basic arithmetic. And so if you take like a space of one rock and you add a space of another rock, you now have 2 rocks. And so you can logically, create a scenario in which Robinson arithmetic is created in the physical universe. So yeah, I would argue, and this becomes a great philosophical question, Brent, about whether or not mathematics is created by the human mind or discovered by the human mind. I'd argue we're discovering it, we're not creating it. We're just understanding better how the universe works. And we are discovering the presence of Robinson arithmetic in the universe. It's already there in the universe, and we're discovering how it works. Mike, you had a question.
Why can't you just say that what you proved is if you accept all your assumptions, you've made the proof? But are we still left with the situation that that's based on on the I guess the tautology that we've defined, and that and maybe a few heuristics that support it. And it doesn't it isn't like a proof Fermat's last theorem or piano postulates that can stand the test of rigor. It makes sense when I accept it. I follow what you said,
Right.
I think, in my own mind. But I could also, I imagine you could construct a similar one that comes to a different conclusion.
So I would love to see your similar one that comes to a different conclusion and try to shoot holes in it. And you're welcome to shoot holes in mine, but I would argue that the only axiom that I've really relied on so far is that formal logic is sound. And I glossed over that, but basically if our ability to reason and logic is not sound, well, that's going to throw a big loop in pretty much everything. And so I think it's pretty uncontroversial, but Gödel's incompleteness theorem, basically what I just described is just using formal logic to make an argument about logical systems. And all I did is compare that argument about logical systems to the way the universe works and the laws of physics are proposed to have worked. So I don't think I've made any assumptions. If you think I have, Mike, let me know what assumption I made that you felt uncomfortable with. But I don't think I've made any crazy assumptions here. I've really built the argument up from a logical axiom, which is that logical systems and formal logic are sound. And I built it up from the ground up. And
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I have used I'm standing on the shoulders of giants, as the saying goes, right? With Gödel, like I would never have come up with that. I thought the guy was wrong, right? Like I went about trying to prove him wrong. So I wouldn't have come up with that. But once I realized how right he was, he taught me a lot about the universe, and it completely changed my paradigm. I went from like a determinist atheist to an agnostic, free will believer. And now I believe in God, and that's a whole nother story, but which we can talk about another day. But if I've made an assumption that you're uncomfortable with, Mike, feel free to call it out.
I don't, in the same, you mentioned Bell's theorem a couple times. And I sort of understand Bell's theorem too. Now, did Bell's theorem say that there is no hidden variable, or at least the proposed hidden variables that people have come up with aren't correct? And to say that there is no hidden variable, I don't think he's come up with it, although more scholarly people than I say I don't understand what I'm talking about. So I have a similar problem with what we're talking about here.
You're very sharp, Mike. You're absolutely right. Bell's theorem did not put the final nail in the coffin of determinism, because superdeterminism still exists, and you can still think that mass energy further than outer space is deterministically influencing subatomic particles on Earth. And so that's why these are two separate papers. The first one was why accepted science has mostly disproven free determinism. This one that I'm showing you here doesn't use Bell's theorem at all. I'm not relying on Bell's theorem at all. So even if you disagree with Bell's theorem, even if you think you can prove Bell wrong, it doesn't affect this argument at all. This argument is my argument defending free will, in which case I think that I've actually put the final nail in the coffin of determinism. And again, like, it's a big, big, bold claim, and I get that I'm probabilistically unlikely to have done such a thing, but I'm going to believe it until someone proves me wrong, and I'm going to ask you guys to listen with an open mind and use your own judgment. That said, Seamus.
Yeah, excuse me. I think one of the things you said, I just wanted to unpack it a little bit. I think if I understood correctly, you said anywhere there's Robinson, what did you call it? Robinson arithmetic?
Yep, Robinson arithmetic.
Yeah, where there's Robinson arithmetic, which is now generally accepted to be consistent with the known universe. Is that correct too?
I'm not saying that it's consistent throughout the known universe. I'm saying that it exists in the known universe. So if you look at the entire physical universe, I think you can argue that there is Robinson arithmetic in the physical universe.
Okay, yeah, I mean,
You
I
can,
didn't
you
question
can
you with
take
that part of
like,
this.
you can take a mathematical textbook and just say, look, this mathematical textbook contains Robinson, or like, I mean, it's not quite that simple. I'm joking, but
Yeah, no, my point wasn't about the
you could
arithmetic. I just wanted
construct
to like
Robinson
make sure.
arithmetic from physical objects in the physical universe.
All right, so like any system that had like almost the basis of all math, let's say like Robinson
Yeah.
arithmetic, like the cornerstones are there to us in the universe. And that this is the next part I wanted to actually talk about. And there can't be a universal truth machine in any system that has Robinson arithmetic. Like
Correct.
that was like one of the hinges I wanted to say. Okay, that's one of the things I just
basically
wanted to touch on.
Gödel's. That's basically
Yeah,
what
yeah.
completeness theorem proves, and it's actually a very like it's a very clever little argument. And when I first learned it, I'm like, oh, that's just like a not very important and like semantic thing, but
Yeah,
it's actually
sure,
not
sure.
semantic. It is actually super profound, and you know why I believe in free will now. So, Ron, I want to let you ask your question.
Yeah, thanks, Garrett.
Great to see you, Ron.
Thanks. It's good to see you too. Your proof about the infinite capabilities of the mind to create infinite amount of issues. I like to let's see if I can just simply do the Gordian knot on you. All of the stuff you've said by a simple analogy. When you go to sleep at night, you dream, right? And we all know in dreams, the ordinary world of cause and effect is totally non-existent. You dream things, you're one time in history, and then you go back in time, you go forward in time. Cause and effect can or cannot be effective, et cetera, et cetera. So the point of the analogy is that what can you make of the dream? Not much, because what's the effect when you wake up? When you wake up, there's nothing relevant about the dream. It's similar to the analogy of the child of a barren woman. There is no child. Your entire thing is built on the assumption of a dream world. And as long as you accept the assumption of the dream world, which spiritual and mystical people talk about as the state of waking consciousness, yes, everything you say can be argued pro and con endlessly. But when you go to another dimension of consciousness, and that's why people mentioned early in the talk that, consciousness and spirituality, we won't go there yet. But the fact of the matter is, once you go there, it's like the sword that just cuts right through the Gordian knot. All your arguments are immediately just laid waste by the simple argument that you're just living in a dream world.
So,
And as somebody who's studied Buddhism or Vedanta will know, or anybody, and I'm not a physicist, but I read enough about David Bohm and hidden variables and non-locality to realize that what he was saying went against the accepted physics of his day, and that what you've been talking about, I forget the name now, to prove Gödel's incompleteness theory. He had to come up with that to disprove Bohm's hidden variables theory. But now scientists are taking more and more consideration that the hidden variables is actually very sound. And I might just mention briefly that after Bohm was kicked out of the physics community for some nonsensical connections with communism, he spent the last half of his life in intimate conversations with both Jiddu Krishnamurti and the Dalai Lama. And he took a very spiritual and mystical turn, while at the same time holding on to his very sound scientific physics understanding, because he studied with with Einstein at Princeton, so he was no slouch. And so, to make a long story short and bring it to a conclusion, all your arguments are based on your theories and opinions of your mind. And all I'm saying is that if it turns out that the mind itself, as you are aware of it, and I am aware of it most of the time, is just a dream, then all of these arguments about free will and determinism are as valid as the talking about the child of a barren woman. And that's why the last thing I'll say is, if you look at most Eastern philosophy and Vedanta and stuff, you'll see that they don't even really, the true Vedantins, they don't even go to the free will thing, because they say it's no sense arguing. There's no, at the world of appearance, you can argue for cause and effect and free will and determinism, but there's a world of consciousness beyond, and in that cause and effect, time and space don't even exist. They're just concepts in the mind. I
So, Ron,
probably spoke
I'm a
too
little
long, so I
confused.
apologize.
I'm a little confused, Ron. So it sounds like you're saying that you feel like I've assumed something about the mind, but I haven't even brought the mind up in my argument at all so far. So where did you feel that I assumed the mind? I haven't even entered the mind into anything other
Well,
than
I could just say, for example, you said logic is pretty much, accepted. Robinson's arithmetic is accepted. I assume you accept that time and space and causality exist, that they're realities, not just simply categories in the mind. You don't realize almost everything that you do, and I do, we have to begin to realize this is just living in the world of the mind. It's a small world. It's incredibly large in one sense, in all the magnitude of the amazing things that we've done in space and health and science. But at another level, it's minuscule. It's a wimp. It's nothing, the mind, other than a doorway into a much more infinite consciousness, what David Bohm called infinite potential.
So, Ron, are you saying you don't believe that formal logic is sound? You don't think that like you think that something can be both true and not true at the same time?
Absolutely. What I'm saying is that in the world of the phenomena of appearances, all of those laws of nature do apply, just as when you're in the dream, all that's happening in the dream makes sense. All I'm saying is that in the noumenal world, when one wakes up from the dream, all of those phenomenal laws of nature are no longer applicable.
Mm-hmm. I'm having a little trouble understanding what concern you have with the argument that I've laid out so far. Can you hone in on like the sentence or the paragraph where you started to disagree, where you found issue with?
The basic thing is you're arguing from a point of view of Garrett Lang, who is identified as a mind body living in time, space, etc., etc. All I'm saying is that in the mystical and in the non-dual philosophies, that whole point of view is shown to be illusory.
Okay. I would love to hear in the online community, Ron, like more about how our self-perception is illusory. But I guess for now, let's try to focus on the argument that I'm making from the perspective of, if we can assume that we at least self-perceive that we are sentient beings and that we are human, we at least have the illusion of free will. And that's all I'm asking people to like start with. I do want people to start with like I at least have an illusion of free will. And I guess Mike said some people don't even think that we have that. That's interesting. I would be interested to talk with someone and try to ask them questions about how they function in society if they don't even have the fundamental concept of being a person that makes decisions. I don't know how someone would function that way. So that said, let me let Chris ask his question.
Yeah, Garrett, thanks. I mean, I think you did a lot of good work on this. And I'm probably somewhere down the middle between the discussion you had with the last gentleman. I think if you make a definitive argument in philosophy, which we're doing, right? We shouldn't have to rely on very deep, like, sophist, like metaphysical understanding, or very complex mathematical and logical deductions to arrive at the conclusion. Because if that has to be done, both those methods are very esoterical formal system in themselves, right? That have limitations. So for example, I mean, you can if you rest your argument based on strictly on formal logic or strictly on metaphysics, then people can challenge the legitimacy and the basis and the limitation of those two particular systems, right? Because they are
whether or
they're
not
abstractions. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I mean, someone can challenge whether or not formal logic is sound, but like I guess that's like challenging whether or not objective reality exists, which is, it was intellectually interesting for me for about 2 weeks and I got over it and is no longer intellectually interesting for me. Some people love to talk about
No, it's not. So Gary, it's not whether formal logic is sound, like is it real? Is it, is it useful? It's more
right.
like, is it, if I'm going to use formal logic to explain the base, the base of universe, right? In terms of like a very big question in terms of determinism versus free will, right?
Right.
What is the limitation on formal logic in explaining that? So we had to recognize that the tool that we're using. It's like when we go fix a car with a wrench. I mean, the wrench can do a lot of cool things in my hands, but I need to recognize it's got its limitations. So one of the things I recognize in this particular argument, right, was Gödel's theory, is it really assumes that you have this either perfect truth machine or your example, this perfect physics machine, right?
Right.
That encompass all information. The problem is that it's impossible to define the information pool from my perspective, right? Because the information, as far as we know, is infinite, both on the dimensional level and the axiomal level, right? So we are assuming a machine and a mechanism was infinite scale. So the first thing we have to do logically is define, can we even define infinity, right? This is like a logical connection right there. And then if you do assume the true definition of infinity, then the actual outcome shouldn't be limited, right? Because we're limiting the outcome because we're saying, given all the formal information that we know, that's in this whatever mechanism that we have, right? Depends on the subject. We prove this is logically impossible. But given that we can never possibly know all the information, and the parameter that goes into the machine, how do we know that definitively logically that is impossible?
Sorry,
we just get into.
I definitely lost you somewhere in the argument because we're not actually saying given all the information we know. It has nothing to do with what we know. This is about what is possibly knowable by the laws of physics themselves, not at all has nothing to do with our knowledge of the laws of physics, our knowledge of science, mathematics, none of that. It has nothing to do with what we know as humanity or anything. It's not related to that at all. It's a theoretical argument about what is possibly knowable by the laws of physics themselves, not anything to do with our knowledge of the laws of physics or anything to do with that.
Right. So what I'm saying is that the definition of a law of physics for me is a little more expanded than the definition of law of physics in a physics book, right? Or anything that we know of physics today. It is literally everything that we don't know, and and by definition is infinite.
I'm sorry to cut you off, but like, you're not understanding what I'm saying. It's not about what's in a physics book today. It's about what's theoretically possible by the laws of physics themselves, not our knowledge of the laws of physics, not what we know about them today. It's about what's theoretically possible by any laws of physics that are even conceivable logically. That's what the limitation is about. So it's not about our knowledge of the laws of physics. I haven't brought our knowledge of the laws of physics into any of this. This has nothing to do with our
I agree with you. I think we're saying the same. We're saying, yes, we're saying the same thing. Maybe the little difference is that it's even the law of physics that's not conceived, right? It's just out there. Is anything that is everything that's possibly out there, right? Now,
Right.
if we have something, that includes everything that's possibly out there, then you can't dismiss the possibility that they can actually give you the right answer.
That is what
Now,
I logically proved that the laws of physics, if they are consistent, meaning if they make deterministic decisions, they are incapable of determining what is going to happen at the next moment in time. That's what I logically showed using very simple, like, I think, like Gödel's incompleteness theorem, it's a 400 level computer science theorem, but I think I explained it in a way that shows that it's actually a very simple concept. It's just that certain questions are unanswerable by a logically consistent knowledge base. And it's a simple fundamental limitation of something that is logically consistent, and determinism is logically consistent. And therefore, there's a fundamental limitation of, deterministic laws of physics such that they literally can't determine the next moment in time on their own with absolute precision and certainty. And that actually,
yeah, but then how do we? So for example, like, do you consider that when we have the double slit experiment, would you consider that a failure of determinism or a failure of
let's
understanding?
save that for another day. I have a paper on the double slit experiment. If you want, I'll post it.
No. What I'm saying is that it goes to your arguments, right? Because for me, it's like when you had to add on something called, I don't think to say that you determine something with absolute precision and I forgot the word you're using, but anyway, if it was absolute precision with one single outcome is the exact definition of like determinism.
Determinism
right?
says that there is only precisely one possible outcome for any particular.
Determinism says there's a cause and the result is inevitable.
Right, which means that
It
there's
doesn't. You can't have multiple. You can potentially have different outcomes, but just based on different causes. We just don't know exactly what we don't actually completely understand what the causes are, right?
No, so yes, we may not understand what the causes are, but determinism says only one result is possible. And I want to let Michael's had his hand up for some time. So I want to let him go. Michael Abramson.
Yeah.
Right. Good to see you, Michael.
I probably consider my position as compatibilist, and I don't think that there is a direct connection between determinism and what we intuitively at least understand as a free will. And this is for two reasons. First, even if we consider only classical physics, there is still a place for indeterminism, if I could use this word. So there are bifurcation points. There are the states of unstable equilibrium, where there is nothing in laws of physics, or for certain initial conditions, even in initial conditions, that would force system to act in this or that way. So there is a place, it seems, for making choice, even in classical physics, that is usually considered as deterministic. And at the same time, even if we assume that the alternative to determinism is some sort of probabilistic causation. So there is some degree of randomness. Does it necessarily mean that a system which makes a choice, for instance, you or me, makes a free choice?
And that's the question we're going to get to in a little bit. I appreciate you leading into it. We're going to get there very soon, and people asked about it before. If you don't mind, let me keep going through the argument, and I will get to it. I think
Okay.
quickly. I'm pretty sure. By the way, is anyone willing to volunteer to watch the chat and then interrupt me if someone has comments? Because like I just realized someone had asked me to zoom in on the text, and I didn't notice that until now because I'm not a terrible multitasker. Anyone want to volunteer to watch the text? Oh, actually, you know what? They may have actually sent it to me directly. So let me just ask people to give feedback in the general chat. And
okay, Garrett, and at some point, maybe near the end of our meeting, I may need your help for access to Discord because
yeah, I'll help you.
Okay.
We'll do at the end of the meeting, what we'll do is we'll do like we can do screen shares for anyone that's having trouble getting in. Some people have trouble getting in. I'll walk people through it. Like usually a lost password will get you in. And if not, then you can create a new account, but we'll work through it. James mentioned that Sartre's argument for free will is very convincing and relies on nothing. I would love to see that. I'm going to try to.
Excuse me,
Yeah.
Garrett. I can watch the chat for you.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Thanks, Llewellyn. It was Llewellyn, right?
Yeah.
Great. Thank you. So if everybody can put their feedback, not direct message to me, but do it in the general chat so Llewellyn can see it, because I can't pay attention to the chat and actually, be able to manage the conversation at the same time. I'm just not that good a multitasker. I don't know. And supposedly no human beings are very good multitaskers, and I'm probably one of the worst of them. So
Deep work.
like I'm very good when I focus on one thing. I'm good at it, but like I cannot do more than one thing at a time. I'm very single-threaded. So I don't have a multi-threaded processor, although I built one. So
You just disproved the theory on
what's that?
like that could be a new axiom. What did you say? That was funny. I'm
Single-threaded.
not a good no, you said I'm not a good multitasker, but I built one. It's just like that's
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's
just
a
a
funny
spell
thing,
for axiom.
if you
There
think
you go.
about artificial intelligence, it can do stuff that human beings can't do already. And like, lots of stuff that artificial intelligence can do. We've built stuff that can do things we can't do that no human being can do, right? The Go champion is a bot, right? Like the Go champion of the world is a machine. And literally Go is a really hard, like I'm terrible at that game. So, and I think I'm a reasonably smart person, but I'm really bad at Go. I've never played it very much, admittedly, but so anyway, let me talk about quantum mechanics for a minute. This all kind of resonates with quantum mechanics because quantum particles can't be precisely and accurately predicted. And as we've learned, the laws of physics themselves can't predict the next moment in time with complete accuracy. So there are some sort of self-defining statements at work here where the physical world is manifesting in an interesting way that includes the possibilities. And all I'm going to do is introduce the possibilities of free will and randomness. And Ron, is your hand up new or is that from before? I'm guessing
Before, I'm sorry.
no problem. I sometimes don't know. So basically, I talk a little bit about Bell's theorem, but basically now here's where I make the argument for so basically what I've shown so far is that if I'm right with Gödel's incompleteness theorem and using this problem transformation of the physical state of the universe and the laws of physics being a black box, then something other than determinism is determining the next moment in time. Now, if we sort of use our brains to think about our critical thinking skills, as we like to talk about in the Free Thinker Institute, if we use our critical thinking skills that, well, what else could be a factor here at determining the next state of the universe? Well, there's two things that come to mind, and I've only been able to think of two, which is randomness and or free will. Now, let's take for given that we all have an illusion of free will. Now, at least let's assume we have an illusion. Someone earlier said that some people, Mike said that people have written that they don't even have an illusion of free will. I'm not going to address that today. Let's just assume we have the illusion of free will. And so there's two possibilities. One is that the illusion of free will has evolved randomly and somehow given us the perception that we actually have free will rather than rather than being random, it's kind of disguised itself as sort of pseudo free will, but truly our decisions are random. And so our perception that we actually determine our decisions, our actual decisions are random, even though we have this self-perception that we determine them. And then the other possibility is that we actually have free will. Now, I would argue the less difficult pill to swallow is that if determinism has been disproved, it's pretty hard for me to imagine like randomness disguising itself as an illusion of free will, because I can think of many other paradigms which would have far better evolutionary capacity, which most of us, maybe not all of us, but most of us probably believe in evolution. And for those of us that believe in evolution, and I do believe in God, but I believe in evolution, I think they're compatible. And another story for another day, but like, if you believe in evolution and that life evolves, like it's a little hard to imagine that the illusion of free will would help us, especially when you consider that some people commit suicide, right? And that's ending your life. And some people commit suicide before they have kids. Well, that's not an evolutionarily selectable thing. There are far more things than free will that I would imagine would evolve from randomness before the illusion of free will would evolve. And so I find it a little hard to believe that if we introduce randomness and free will, that our free will is actually randomness disguised as free will. If anyone wants to try to make a good argument, I would love to hear it, because I definitely have met people that think that our free will is randomness disguised as free will. So people do believe this. I just haven't really been able to understand why they believe it. So if anyone has that belief, I would love to hear you out and understand why you think it's more likely that randomness disguised itself as free will than that we actually have free will. And now we got to the thing that everyone was asking about. So Michael, go ahead.
I don't really think that randomness or determinism is what define when we are making decisions, that this is a manifestation of free will. It's not about how we make decisions. Yeah, of course, we can make decisions deterministically, like following the logical sequence of steps, for instance, or some sort of randomness can be involved in making decisions. And this is true, by the way, for humans and for AI systems and maybe for other systems as well. But the critical question to me is who makes decisions? So free will is about agency. It's about, in general, it's about who is acting, which system is acting.
Right.
And if the action involves making decisions, then this is about who is making decisions and how constrained this system is, which is making decisions. Because sometimes really there is no choice because of external circumstances.
So yeah.
So random or not, decision-making process typically involves both. But to me, it's not the main question.
So what's not the main question? Sorry, say that again.
The main question is who is making this? Who is making decisions?
So you're stuck on, like, instead of saying that there's free will or not free will, you hypothesize that someone other than you is making your decisions for you, and you perceive you to be making them, even though someone else or something else is making them for you. Is that right, Mike?
Yes. So even if my decision behind the hood or under the hood is completely deterministic, it does not matter as long as this is my decision.
So
as long as this is determined by me, by my values, my knowledge, my information, whatever.
right.
This is still my decision.
And there's a good, and that's why I said determinists can be good people too. Like, there doesn't mean you're a bad person because you're a determinist. I think I was a very ethical determinist, but like, I think that, you know, if you haven't found a reason to disagree with my argument so far, I think I've proven determinism wrong, and now we have to reconcile with randomness and free will and which one is more likely. And so I do want to repeat the question. I do want to repeat the question. Go ahead.
Get it. At best, you only proved that absolute determinism is wrong. Because even probabilistic causation, it still can be to some degree deterministic. But
What
just
type
not
of
absolute.
determinism do you think still exists? The only one I'm aware of that I haven't disproven is adequate determinism, which, like I said, leaves open the door for free will. So what type of determinism do you think still exists? Determinism, by the way, as is defined by the SEP, is the belief that the natural laws are the only possible, basically the only thing that predicts the future or that creates the future. And most definitions of determinism say there's only one possible future. So if there's a type of determinism you think I haven't disproven, let me know what type it is and I'll research it.
That's an interesting question, and probably we don't have an answer for this yet. But for instance, you probably know there is this transactional interpretation of quantum mechanics that posits that the present is determined jointly by the past and the future. So it's like a handshake between initial conditions and final conditions of the system. And if you take this standpoint, then I don't know how would you consider, is it the one future or is it multiple future?
Yeah, I haven't heard that saying that the present is determined by the past and the future. I don't know how the future could determine the present because it hasn't happened yet. The future is what we're trying to determine right now. I don't see how anything in the present or past could possibly, or in the future could determine the future, because that's a you know, that's a little weird, but worth thinking about another.
So we definitely know that there are processes and there are systems that to us seem identical, or their states appear identical, but the outcome of their behavior can be not reproducible, not the same. And this is what we call.
And that's all I'm arguing for, is that I'm arguing for non-determinism, which is that the outcomes are not predictable. And that's what quantum mechanics says, which everything I've said is totally compatible with quantum mechanics. And in fact, I would argue it explains why quantum mechanics finds the results it does, which baffle most scientists, because they're determinists and they're like, well, how can this quantum mechanics stuff be totally random when the world is deterministic? Because they're scientists, and most scientists are deterministic because, like I said, most scientific progress has been from studying deterministic systems. That said, we have three questions up, three hands up, so I want to let Peter go next.
Yeah,
Michael,
but
if we could,
again, it only appears this way. But if you take this transactional interpretation of quantum mechanics, then it becomes deterministic.
Let's let
you just don't know this final condition, or don't consider.
Let's let Peter ask his question, Michael, if that's okay.
Okay.
Hi, Garrett. Yeah, I just want to say thank you for hosting such a fascinating topic on the subject of the mind. Okay, and I just wanted to ask if this is okay, because I don't want to disrupt the flow by accidentally asking or stating something that is completely not what's going on. But can I talk about like decision making or on the lines of choice?
Sure.
Okay, good. So in terms of on the lines of choice or being able to make any choices at all, I was going to allude something to, and by the way, sometimes I'm going to probably be asking rhetorical questions and sometimes genuine questions, and I will state them as I go, but I'll make this quite short because I understand we don't really have that much time. But I'm going to make the argument from the neuroscience and the legal crossover, the legal standpoint crossover. And it's not difficult. It's not too difficult if we actually go online and actually search up a lot of cases where people were exonerated later on from their crimes after discovering through fMRI that there is actually a brain tumor that affected their decision making. So my question is, and this is not even theoretical because there's a lot of, and I'm pretty sure there will be more cases as we go in the future. But assuming the scenario is that someone is not born with a brain tumor, and we can prove that, and this person has never really committed any crimes on any sort, and this person is, well known by his or her community, but over time people have seen the behavioral changes of this person. And let's say, and there's one case, I forgot the name of this case, and the person, forgive me, but you can actually look this up if you kind of listen to my description of it pretty well. But there was a pediatrician in the early 2000s, in the late 90s, excuse me, a pediatrician who later turned a pedophile who actually raped one of his patients. And it was much later, after he was arrested, then he was actually discovered. It was discovered that he has a brain tumor on one of the lobes on his brain. And after the resection of the brain tumor, the man was actually being watched and monitored very closely for, I believe, a couple of years behind bars. And through a lot of neurosciences research and showing consistently month after month that he did not show any tendency to pedophilic urges or any other urges to commit crimes of any sort. So when we talk about this kind of particular scenario, can we really say that person had made their choices with their free will if there's an external factor that has been affecting his choices ever since the tumor has been growing on his brain? And my second kind of question, these are not rhetorical questions, just for the record, is that if we truly have free will, then how come antidepressants can work and why drugs and addiction can also work? I'm done with my question.
So remember, the definition of free will that I'm defending is only that we can influence the possible probable outcome, possible outcome out of a group of choices. And so I'm not making any arguments about people with tumors or without tumors or anything like that. All I'm saying is, if you want Cheerios or cornflakes for breakfast, you get to decide. It's not the laws of physics deciding whether you want Cheerios or cornflakes. You get to decide. Trivial stuff, right? Now, later I will argue that the power of the will is very strong in some cases, but the power of the laws of physics are very strong too. And in the cases of people with tumors, the laws of physics are overriding free will. And so the person's decisions are much smaller and their free will has a much less of an influence. So I don't think that disproves free will. It just says that free will is more limited by certain people in certain circumstances, which, like I said in the beginning as a joke, but I mean it, is that the only people that have free will are the ones that think they do, because if you don't exercise your free will, it's, in some respects a little bit like a muscle. If you don't use it, then you lose it and you just do whatever is most likely to happen. So the second question is, if we have free will, why do antidepressants work? Again, it's kind of a similar answer, which is, antidepressants are a chemical thing that produces a likely result, and they, it doesn't, like someone with depression can still, get up in the morning. Now they may want to stay in bed and they may prefer that, but they can get up, and some days they do, and some days they don't. And so there's still free will decisions going on, but their options are limited. They're probably not going to go for a marathon run, right? Like most likely they're not going to be the top performer at work if they're going through depression. And so their options of what's possible or what's likely to happen become very limited. So all I would say is that I'm not arguing that, again, this argument that free will can trump everything, not arguing that. I'm just saying we have some semblance of free will, not that free will is all powerful. With that, I want to let Ron go, and then after Ron, we'll let Brent go. So Ron, just be conscious that Brent's right after you.
Okay, so I'm going to basically come back to my original argument from a different point of view, so that maybe this might help you a little bit. And I'm going to use what Michael brought up, the concept of agency. So you talk about the possibility that we have, as we are agents, and we have some degree, perhaps, let's just say perhaps we have some degree of agency, of free will, right? Now, my question to you is, you, Garrett, are arguing that you have or may have some degree of free will, right? Okay, now here's the question. What were you before you were born? Did you have any free will before you were born?
That gets into a whole nother conversation for another night, Ron, which I'm happy to go into. But it actually, my answer to that question hinges on whether or not you agree with my argument for free will. So I'm going to abstain from the, before I was born, did I have free will question, if you don't mind. But I am just arguing that we have some degree of free will. And yeah, I don't know that I want to go down the path, because it's a rabbit hole, Ron. And I hope you don't mind my abstaining from that.
Well, it's not a question of minding. It's a question of, if you want to be consistent and you want to rely on your mind, brain to reason through all these things, then you can't dismiss as problematic or rabbit holes different situations which are going to challenge your fundamental axioms that you're building your whole reasoned logic system on.
Yeah, I don't think it does, to be honest, Ron, because nothing I've
Well,
talked about.
yeah, that, we can agree to disagree here, but I think absolutely it totally demolishes your whole argument if you begin to consider who you were before you were born. We're talking about from the point of view, just looking at it from the point of view of agency.
Right? So why do you think that's relevant
to be born?
Why do you
did not choose to be born?
Well, that's your opinion, but why do you think that it's relevant to the argument that I've made so far, whether or not we had free will before we were born? Why is that relevant to the argument that I've made?
Because you're starting out with the assumption that you, Garrett Wade, are already a reasonable agent who can make decisions that can be classified in your form of reasoning as a version of free will. You don't seem to see all the assumptions that all the baggage that you're carrying with you from the very
I don't. You're right.
beginning.
I don't. So point them out for me. Where's the assumptions? Where are the assumptions?
Have you ever asked the question, who am I? Do you really know who Garrett Lang is?
I have a whole personal profile that I presented at another meeting that I called the painting of the spirit, and I think that's the essence of who I am. So I'm pretty confident I know who I am, but I'm not sure why you're asking and how it's relevant to the argument tonight.
Well, I won't go into, as you said, this is for another night, but I'm just curious if your portrait begins with the date of your birth, or it goes well prior to the date of your birth.
Depends on your spiritual beliefs, Ron. If you believe in life before birth, then it goes to before. If you don't, then it started when I was born, and you can choose the answer for yourself.
All I'm saying is, depending on which choice you make to that question, will ultimately, from a reasonable point of view, will pretty much lead you down the path to believing that there is such a thing as free will, or there's no such thing as free will. That's all I'm saying.
Why do you think that, Ron? Because I would argue that whether or not I had an existence before this life or not, none of my argument has hinged on past life anything. It's all been about the laws of physics and logical systems. Like I haven't really relied on it.
Again, you're totally missing the point. The
I
laws of
agree.
physics, all of these things exist in your mind only.
Ron, I don't mean to be rude, but are you an extreme solipsist?
I really don't get caught up too much in categories and words and
You-
definitions, because they all have language is a magnificent tool, but it's a limited tool.
Let me ask differently. Do you think that I exist, or am I a figment of your mind?
I think all the entire creation is an appearance.
So, but you didn't answer my question.
I did. I said it doesn't. The entire creation does not exist in reality, but it exists in appearance, not in essence, but in appearance. It exists as a phenomenon. As a phenomena, it exists. I have a body, you have a body, etc. All of these things, but they don't exist in essence. In essence, any more than the dream has any essence to it. It's just an appearance.
Right, you're talking about like I'm trying to remember. Is it Maya? The samsara.
Yes.
Samsara,
It's
yeah.
the
So
it's the power of the absolute to project through Maya or illusion
Yeah.
the universe.
okay, thank you. I was insecure about the Maya reference, so thank you for confirming that. So so Ron, that's a good topic in some respects for another night, because whether or not reality exists, and I have a paper on that as well, which I'm happy to post in reference, just remind me. Like there's a common theory called simulation theory, which is, you know, what the Matrix is based on, which I love those movies, don't get me wrong. And I found them intellectually fun to watch. And simulation theory is like a thing that's thought about by a lot of people. And I would argue simulation theory and the Matrix is, I think, what you're getting at, Ron, right? Which is that our reality is really an illusion, and we're living in a simulation, and we are basically, yeah, we're living in a simulation. And what my paper basically argues is that that's actually an irrelevant conversation, whether or not we're living in a simulation, only because even if we're living in a simulation, the best strategy, if we are living in a simulation, is to treat the simulation like reality. So whether or not it is a simulation, if my paper is right, and you're welcome to read it, Ron, and we should do this another night if you don't mind, Ron, because it's a little bit of a digression from free will, although I agree with you, Ron, it's relevant. So I'm not trying to discount you at all. Like, great points, like very deep insight, but I would just say it's a separate conversation about whether or not objective reality exists. For the conversation tonight, I just want to assume that objective reality exists, and we have an illusion of free will as being sentient beings within that reality. And then the question is, are our decisions made for us by the laws of physics, or are they made by randomness, or do we have free will and we make those decisions? So those are kind of the guideline for tonight. But I'm going to write a reminder, Ron, to set up another meeting about simulation theory. Is that okay?
It's okay. And yeah, I'm just going to say one more thing, just because I don't want to go on. But if it turns out that the simulation is what we're in, then there always has to be the question: who is simulating it?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Well, Ron, that's why I asked, like, the Boltzmann brain is this concept that we're all solipsists, I'm a solipsist and you're all figments of my imagination, and I'm a brain in some vat. But then the question is, where is that vat, and who created the vat, and who created our existence? And so you're right, Ron, like if it's all an illusion, who created the illusion? And that's what my simulation theory paper gets at. But I don't want to digress on that. I want to let Brent, because he's been very patient, speak.
All right. Let's try this from a different perspective. Let's just ask ourselves why we came here tonight.
Sure.
Like, just ask yourself, like, why am I in this meeting right now? And if you can get a hold of that, then you'll discover that the reason that you're here is because you wanted to come here, right? You had a desire arise in your consciousness to be here. Sometime between the time you found out about this meeting and before it started, or in the middle of it, or whatever, whenever you came here, you had a feeling come into your consciousness of a desire to come here, and it was stronger than the desire to do anything else. Stay home, go someplace else, whatever. On this day at this time, we all had a desire to come here that was stronger than anything else. So we share that. So when we look at that, like when did that desire arise? And when it arose in you, was that not the impetus for you to say, I'm going to go to this meeting? And wasn't it superfluous in a way to say, I choose going to this meeting because you already felt like going to the meeting before you said, I choose to go? In fact, whenever you make a decision like that, you think you're making a decision like that, like I choose to go to this meeting tonight. You wouldn't say that to yourself unless you already felt like you wanted to go. We never say to ourselves, I want to go do something I don't want to do. The only time we say I want to go do something is when we want to do it, and wanting is a desire that has come into consciousness. So if that desire is not there, then you're not here. There's a lot of people that know about this meeting, but they're someplace else because their desire took them someplace else. And generally what we do when there's a multiplicity of desires, especially when they overlap and there's a time problem and you can't do two things at one time, if we don't immediately know what we're going to do, we just sit with it. We go, okay, if I go through door A, what kind of experience am I going to have? If I go through door B, what kind of experience am I going to have? And all that comes into consciousness at some point, and it rises up and says, okay, I want to do door A, or it says, I want to do door B, or it says, I don't want to do either one of those. And what that is the ascendancy within our consciousness of desire. And that desire, the stronger one, is always the way we end up going. Like we always are looking for the best deal. Tonight, for all of us at this time, the best deal was to come here. If someone offers you $100 or they offer you $200 and you can have your pick, but you can't have both, you're going to always take the best deal, which is the $200. Now, life doesn't come down to easy situations like that. Sometimes it's very difficult to know which direction you're going to head in if the consequences are severe in either one. But in general, what we basically do is we say, okay, this is what's in my consciousness right now. These are the options that are there. What's the best deal? And that's the one we always go with because we're looking for nice, great experiences, not bad, boring experiences. So by the time we say to ourselves, oh, I choose that, it's superfluous. It's a done deal. We're only acknowledging in that instant what we want to do right then based on the desire that has arisen. Now, there's been some talk about will tonight. Okay, what is will? Will is a strong desire. That's really all it is. It just pops up and we sort of attach to it and think we're doing that because we learned about free will when we were children. We were told about free will, that we had free will and what it was, right about the time we were told there's a Santa Claus, there's an Easter Bunny, there's a Tooth Fairy, this is the greatest country in the world, capitalism is the best ism, and on and on and on it went. The communists used to say, give us the kid for the first 7 years of his life and he'll always be a communist. There's a lot of truth to that. And a lot of people are brainwashed into certain ways of thinking, and you can see them all over the world. They can't get out of their way of thinking. That's because they've grown up in that and their own intuition hasn't arisen and said, no, I don't want to do that. Now, I was lucky. I didn't have anybody battering my intuition down, and I felt I could, of what I wanted came up and I didn't try to censor myself. So I was born into a religion and it got dropped. I was born into believing in free will, and I set out to prove someone wrong who said it didn't exist, and I discovered that it doesn't exist. It's just an illusion. And so I can sit here right now and I can say there is no free will. I used to believe in it. It's an interesting idea, but when you look back at when you learned about free will existing and how you got that, and then you look at what happens when you supposedly make a decision in saying, okay, I'm going in this direction, when that direction is of course what you're going to do because it's the best deal. We don't control the arising of desire within us. We don't control desire. You can't tune it up and make your desire stronger than it is, or tune it down and make it less strong. It is whatever it is. And that's what gets us to do what we do. We think we have free will, but it is really just an illusion.
So Brent, did I lose you at some point in the argument? Like where did I lose you?
Well, I'm saying that you're saying that free will exists. I never saw your definition. I don't know where you put it, but I couldn't find your
I
definition.
put it at the beginning of the paper, so I can go back to it. It's really just that a being's conscious effort to make one outcome more likely than another, that multiple outcomes are possible, and a being's conscious effort to make one outcome more likely than another influences whether or not that outcome is more likely to happen.
Well, the thing is, though, it's like you can't change. Like I could not come here tonight, and I could. And now if another
I know you're
if another
but like I guess, you know, to your point, like I actually was born not being taught free will, and I was a determinist when I was born, and yet I've come to the conclusion that I've proved myself wrong about determinism. And so this is my argument for why I've proved myself wrong, and I'm very open to criticism and feedback. And that said, I would, you know, welcome any criticism on the argument that I've laid out tonight, but I definitely hear that you disagree with it and that you're a determinist and you don't believe we have free will. I get all that, and you're totally entitled to that belief, and I want you to trust your own judgment. All I would ask is that you consider the argument I've laid out with an open mind, and if you have a reason to shoot a hole in it, shoot the hole in it and tell me where my argument went wrong. I just haven't heard that from you yet.
Well, you're missing the point here. If you say that you have free will, then you can say to yourself, okay, I choose to go in this direction. But what I'm saying is you would never ever do that unless that direction was the best deal, defined by the feeling of desire that rises within you, which you do not control. You don't control how much you want to do something. Like right now, ask yourself, if I said to you, leave the group and prove to me you have free will, I don't think you would do that. I don't think you would do that. And I don't think you could, actually. And now, if I offered you $1 million and I could prove to you I'd give it to you to leave this group, you'd be gone.
No,
okay?
There's always wouldn't, Brent.
Huh? You wouldn't?
No.
You wouldn't take $1 million to leave this group right now?
Not necessarily. Again,
I bet you would. I bet you would.
Brent, I get that you don't believe in free will, and I think you do. You believe everyone does what's their desires cause them to be, and you believe those desires are deterministic. I totally hear you. What I'm looking for is a logical contradiction to the argument that I've presented tonight. And that said, I want to let Peter go because we have three more hands up. So I want to let Peter go, and we don't have a lot of time left. So
Okay, sure. I'll make this like probably as less 2 minutes as best as possible. But the first little point is to kind of Brent's point. This is not for or against what he's saying, but I just kind of want to go on to what he said earlier about I think the money argument he was making, right? $100 versus $200. And I'm not sure if Brent, you realize this, but there are studies actually being done in neuroscience clinical labs, which actually can tell pretty fairly accurately, to almost 100% accuracy, that the diet you intake before, it could be hours or even day before the experiment, it would actually determine what kind of decision you'll make. Like, for example, quarters, there's 10 of them. If I take 9 of them, leave you 1, would you take that 1, or would you say, no, screw you, that's really bad for me? Now, here's the condition. If you take the 1, then the other person keeps 9, you take 1. Okay, 1 is still above 0. But as soon as you or the other person, if either one says, no, we're not going to make this deal because this is unfair or for whatever reason, then neither of the two will gain anything. Like both you and I, we will have 0 quarters. And it's proven that certain diet, like for example, if you eat white meat or fish diet, you can actually make more rational decisions when it comes to compared to, like, let's say you eat like a hamburger or Big Mac or fries, for example. So that is my first little point, is that the decision making, we are not completely, so here's, I really don't have a clear standpoint on the free will thing, but this is how I'll explain myself. I'm not saying that we cannot make any decisions at all, because by that definition, I don't think we can really reach where we are today as a civilization or as a species. But at the same time, to say that our free will is or can be independent from outside factors is simply not true. It is always dependent on outside factors. It could be from diet. It could be, for example, 1 second before you do something, there's something that led up to it. And you can actually trace it back to millions of years of evolution, right? Like the culture you grew up in. And let's say if you grew up in a country, in a culture of honor system, then it will be likely to be passed down through generations and so on. So that's my point. And for the sake of time, I'm just going to move on to my last two little points. One is that I just want to just make, this is not directed to anyone, but it's a little fun fact in case you guys haven't covered it. But if you guys did cover it, or if Gary did cover it, then forgive me for not listening too carefully, because I was actually on the road for the first half of the hour, for the first half of the meeting. But in the 1980s, there was, and I'm not claiming this is 100% going to disprove free will, but I think it's a pretty interesting thing that we should look into if anyone's interested. But there is a 1980s study by a neuroscientist named Benjamin Libet, and he actually used EEG to determine with 100% accuracy every time on the little trivial choices that Gary was saying, whether you should pick a banana or an apple. And the EEG was able to pick up the signal on the decision making actually 300 milliseconds or 350 milliseconds before you actually made a conscious effort to do so. And then moving on to my last point, is a question that's not rhetorical. So I do expect certain answers from just anybody. And that is a very simple answer, in my opinion. It's very short. Are Homo sapiens unique when it comes to free will? And why or why not? Thank you.
That's a broader question for, if you don't mind, Peter, because we have very little time. I'm going to save our Homo sapiens, the only ones in free will. I'll just say I don't think we are the only ones that have free will. But that said, I want to address the Libet experiments, because Libet himself has disavowed those experiments and is now performing experiments that argue that we have veto power. But I want to also say that the Libet experiments didn't actually disprove free will. All they disproved is that free will's origin is in the conscious mind, but it does not disprove free will as a paradigm. It just disproves that free will decisions are made later than we're aware of them, which means that free will decisions can still be made before we're aware that we made that decision, which means that our conscious mind can influence the next decision in a subconscious way, and our subconscious makes the decision before we're even aware of it. With the input of our current conscious mind, the next decision is made by the subconscious mind before Libet actually determines, the result. And then only after we make the decision do we become aware of the result. So Libet's experiment did not disprove free will at all. It was a bunch of, bullocks that even he himself has disavowed himself of, and now says that we at least have veto action on free will. So totally get it, read about the Libet experiments. But if you read to more of his modern opinions, he even agrees that his original findings were inaccurate. That said, I want to let Michael go, and then Pete. Michael, try to keep it a little short because we're almost out of time.
Excuse me, Gary, before Michael goes, is there a way for you to post your definition of free will in the chat?
I put it on the screen just a little while ago because I saw that, and then I went down to the next one. So this is the definition. I'll post it in the chat as well.
On Brent's point, there was a book written by Robert Kane, Free Will and Values. It's old, it's maybe something like 50 years ago, but it's still authoritative text on free will. And according to Kane, this situation, as Brent described, when you just follow your desire, it's not the condition when people exercise free will. So there should be two conditions. One is what Kane called alternate possibilities. That's when you really have to make choice at least between two different options. And another one is what Kane defined, if I remember it correctly, life-forming events. So it's only when the choice is really important, when it has far-reaching consequences, for someone who is making this choice. So we are not exercising our free will every minute or every second of our life. It's really rare events when we really have to make the difficult choices. And the difficult choices, this is important because this is not just when we can simply follow our desire. This is when we really have to weigh the different consequences when both systems 1 and 2 are involved, and we have to assess how our choice is compatible with our values and with external environment, whether we can achieve it or not. So this is just pretty rare choices when we exercise the free will. And I mostly agree with Kane on this characterization. And this, of course, is not situation that Libya experiments really investigated, because this was not the life-forming event for participants to press this button or whatever. So I think we have free will, but we only exercise it really rarely and really when it is important for us. Not every day, not when we decide whether to go or not to this meeting, if we already decided that we want to go to this meeting at no scheduled conflicts or whatever. So that's what I wanted to say.
Great, thanks, Michael. Pete, do you want to go next? You're on mute, Pete, just so you know. Just in the bottom left-hand corner, it should be in the bottom left-hand corner, click the microphone button, and then you're on mute, Pete.
Okay, can you hear me?
You're very quiet, but I can hear you.
All right. Back quite a ways. On the contradictions you had, you should look at a book, Gödel Escher Bach by Hofstadter, who goes through that in great detail, that there are mathematical analyses that cannot be proven in any given system. It's the Gödel theorem, and he does an excellent job of describing that. Further on the free will, you're saying that there is no way that humans can affect that. And they showed for proving the delay in actions. Well, that is a well-known fact that your nerves take a fair amount of time to get from one place to the other, to show a reaction. And that's explainable. And why should one decide one thing or another? And I think that there's a lot to be said for the genetic, or the people wanting to survive, the survival instinct that is required in all of us. And that, I think, is one of the most important things. And I think that controls a lot of what we do. But I can't help but believe there's more than that. And the way to do it, I mean, when you look at even in the animal kingdom, sometimes an animal will do one thing, and sometimes it'll do another. And it's pretty much unpredictable. And humans are the same way. They don't react the same way. Some people believe there is a morality. some people believe there is right and wrong. And if you look at the most 99% of the literature, news, etc., the main thing is ought. Should you do this? Or should you do that? And somebody did something bad, we're going to punish him. If somebody did something good, we're going to build a statue to him. And if there is no free will, this is all garbage. There's no sense in any of it. And more than I can believe that that's all been determined with some possible quantum variation back at the Big Bang. I really think that I have something to do with deciding which movie to go to, what person to date, what to do, and what meetings to go to or not to go.
Thanks, Pete. I hear you and agree with you. And I want to share, if we can, two sort of anecdotes just to kind of finish things up. Not anecdotes, but one, I want to share a YouTube video because a lot of people would say, we don't have free will, and in spite of this argument, they would still say we don't have free will, and our decisions are determined for us at birth, and it's nature and nurture, and we don't make any decisions. Well, I would argue, let's take a really clear example. Let's say you're born, disabled with no hands and no arms and no legs, right? Clearly, you're not going to swim, right? Deterministically, there's no way you could swim if you have no arms and no legs, right? I mean, deterministically, it's impossible. However, I want to show a video.
Is 6. Pineapple of Australia going in 2. Taste van Hofdieven goes in 3. World champion.
We're not seeing the actual video.
Oh, you're not seeing the video?
There's also the world record
We're
holder.
looking at your email.
Record holder.
Oh, I'm sorry.
12 right and 4. The only swimmers have gone sub 113 is.
Then I was sharing the wrong screen the whole night.
In international competition. We'll have some stiff competition certainly later on. Gustav Simonenko of Ukraine, Van Wu of China, and Yoav Balinsky of Israel are the.
Maybe this is the wrong. All right, I should have prepared this in advance. Let me cut to the chase and basically say there is a man with no arms and no legs, and he is a swimmer, and he competed in the Paralympics. And I think that's a pretty powerful example of free will. You can go on YouTube and you'll probably find a more pithy video than, for some reason, the one that I had a big lead in, and I didn't remember that it did. But basically, there's a guy with no arms and no legs that learned to swim. You would think deterministically, someone with no arms and no legs is never going to learn to swim. But his will overpowered his nature and his nurture, and he did learn to swim. The other example that I'll give in terms of the strength of the will is that of the placebo effect, which is a well-documented, scientifically known effect where if someone takes a placebo and they think they got medication, they will actually improve more than someone who did not get medication, even though that thinks that they did not get medication, even though both of them didn't get medication. The person who thinks they got medication will actually heal better than the person who doesn't think they got medication. So we can sort of fool ourselves into healing ourselves solely through will. And to me, that's an incontrovertible, scientifically known fact that shows that free will and perception actually heal the human body in a way that is kind of incredible, to be honest. When I realized that placebo effect is the effect of will, I was like blown away, and it became incontrovertible truth. And so that's what I want to give as two anecdotes, or not anecdotes, but two examples of the power of free will and how influential it can be over our lives. And Pete, go ahead, and then I'm going to kind of give some closing arguments. Did you still have your hand up?
And in your first example of Paralympic swimmer, okay.
Garrett?
Sorry, go ahead.
I
Pete.
wanted to say that this would be a perfect example of life-changing event for Kane when that guy decided to become a swimmer, to learn to swim.
Pete, go ahead.
Garrett, one minor correction. It didn't begin at birth. It began at the Big Bang Theory, was what determined which movie you're going to look at tomorrow.
Well, it determined that I was going to pick up the wrong movie, apparently. So clearly that wasn't my fault. Don't blame me. Blame the Big Bang that I pulled up the wrong movie. So
you're only on 14 billion years.
I mean, you know, like I'm going to blame the 14 billion years ago Big Bang, or I'm going to take responsibility for my mistake. I'm going to blame myself personally. And maybe I was predetermined to blame myself, but I'm going to blame myself nonetheless. I like to believe that I can take responsibility for my mistakes, and sharing the wrong screen was one. And I apologize. Like I was sharing my what it was supposed to be my private notes, apparently the whole evening. And I was intending to share the screen with the paper. And somehow no one pointed out that I wasn't sharing the papers. And I don't know how I managed to do that, but hopefully I didn't do anything embarrassing. If so, this may
That was righteous porn. That was righteous porn.
Yeah, well, you know, what can I say? What can I say? And
by the way, Garrett, I just want to say really quickly that whole
placebo
effect, and of course we all know that placebo effect doesn't work 100% of the time, right? And
I
highly doubt anything does, but what really does in essence is to prey on I'm not saying the word pray as in a bad way, right? Like not hands together in prayer, but I'm talking about prey versus predator, that kind of prey. The whole placebo effect is nothing but preying on the scientific understanding of psychoneuroimmunology, which is what happens in your head, in your brain, can affect your body. And there's a reason why there are normal people like you and I, in terms of physical fitness, can actually be more healthier and more immune to disease and sickness. Doesn't even have to be COVID. It could be anything, like just minor cold, compared to someone who's like NFL athlete, but is going through like chronic depression.
So let me ask you this, Peter. If free will can't impact someone's health, why does a person who got a placebo sugar pill versus someone who didn't, why does the person?
Because those people were told, because those people, okay, so maybe not told every time, but if you think, okay, so obviously placebo effect doesn't work, you know, if you're like, I'm going to give you a fake pill, right? If you do that to me, I'm just going to be like, what, Doc, why don't you give me the real pill? Well, but my point here is that you as a subject, I hope nobody will kidnap anyone from their own house and be like, let's do a placebo effect in this person. Like that would be illegal and unethical. But my point is, you probably participated 99% sure because you thought this was going to be interesting. So my point is, you are aware of the certain basics of what you're getting yourself into, right? Unless you're just being kidnapped. And that being said, when you are told that there's a pill that is going to cure certain problems or help alleviate certain stress, or even by a little bit, but they're not going to tell you the scientific reason. They're not going to tell you that they're BSing you, of course. But knowing that fact, you can actually change the brain chemistry because of the external factor that someone else, for example, a scientist, has told you, hey, you're about to take a pill that is absolutely scientifically revolutionary to the understanding of this disease. And that is strong enough, but it's still an external factor.
But what's your explanation of why the belief that a scientist said that something will heal you? Why does it actually have an effect to believe that? If the world is deterministic, a belief is just a belief. It doesn't impact the laws of physics, right? So the laws of physics determine our health or our sickness. So why should our health or sickness be influenced by a belief? A belief is just another deterministic effect.
Because it relaxes you. Because now you don't have the struggle of, oh, am I going to be well or not? They've told you that taking this pill is going to make you better. Immediately, relaxation is going to take place, and you're probably going to be more susceptible to feeling better automatically, just because you're not stressed out about the whole idea.
I mean, this is not to say that there are no people who are going into these unknowingly placebo effect. The reason I say unknowingly is because they will never tell you that, or it defeats the purpose. But I mean, you can definitely be a person that goes like, yeah, this is all bullshit. Of course you can, but those people don't really exist that often, nearly as much as people who think the other way around. Is because why would scientists deliberately actually do something that doesn't work and they know they've made no progress just to do this?
That's part of every drug study, Peter. Every drug study has a placebo. A drug cannot be approved legally without a placebo being given to people who are being given the actual drug. So some
I understand, but the placebo effect cannot come with, but it can't come alone. It has to have an actual drug, if that makes sense. Like, I don't have anything, but I'm going to give everyone placebo. What's the point of advancing science if we do that?
They have even done what you said, which is tell someone they're giving them a placebo and still they fool themselves into thinking that it's going to help them. So, you know, it's just something to consider is that, you know, if you think that the relaxation from coming from a placebo will somehow impact someone's health in a positive way, how can a placebo have the health impacts of, you know, like you would have to then prove that relaxation actually has the health impacts of, you know, that the placebo actually implements, which I think would be a pretty high bar to achieve. So I would encourage you guys to, you know,
I never claimed that it's going to work for a lot of diseases. There are certain diseases, for example, if someone gets like, you know, stage 3 or 4 pancreatic cancer or like glioblastoma multiforme in their brain, you can't just say like, I'm going to think positively and it's going to go away. I never claimed that it's going to work on every disease, but in certain minor cases that it can work because it's not scientifically speaking that severe in the first place. And it can possibly be influenced by psychoneuroimmunology alone.
Right. So there's been a lot of, you know, I had a close family member die of cancer not too long ago. And so I did a little bit of looking into, quite a bit of looking into it. And actually a lot of what is taught about cancer is that you need to believe that you're going to get better and you need to fight the cancer. And, you know, actually there are very scientifically validatable results. And I would encourage Brent and Peter for you guys to look up the results of people who have the will to fight cancer versus those who don't and those who give in. There's a big difference between those who, you know, have the will to fight cancer and those who don't. Again, I'm not expecting to convince you. All I would encourage you to do is to read the paper and try to look for a logical area that you disagree with the paper and add a comment.
I'll just close up with this because this is what something Brent was saying, and forgive me if I'm kind of butchering a little bit, but I hope I'm getting you right, Brent. But the whole, you know, you were talking about one keyword. It reminded me of like stress. That's what you said. Sorry, that's all I remember in the heat of the moment. But you know, even if you believe in something, let's say that you can't prove yourself and you don't know if anyone can prove it, but that strong effect that you will have will reduce stress. And we have proven through science over the decades, I don't know about centuries, probably just decades, I would say for now, is that stress in itself is not really a killer, but it can act as like an accelerant to other diseases. So the ability to actually change your mindset to, let's say, to a certain point where it's conducive to a lesser stress state for your mental and therefore your physical level, it can actually give you much better chance of surviving cancer. And this is not to, and the reason I say that is because you can't just, you know, pray away your cancer, because there's chemotherapy, there's surgical treatments, but on top of all those, if you can actually calm yourself by manipulating your thoughts in your own brain, that is another layer of protection against the already deadly disease.
Perhaps, but what you should do is try to look for a, you know, in general, my recommendation is to counter confirmation bias and look for evidence that disagrees with your current belief. And so what I would encourage you to do is look for some situation in where someone's health is actually increased by, you know, having some stress, and then see whether or not the placebo effect impacts it, or look for a study where the placebo is also given with a stress reducer, where they say this is a placebo, but it's just a stress reducer, although that's not a great example because, like I told you, even when people are told they're given a placebo, sometimes they're actually impacted in a positive light. That said, I do want to close out because we're now 15 minutes after 9 and we were supposed to end at 9, but I really appreciate those who stayed, and I appreciate all of those who came. Hopefully we're going to send an email with a survey. I would love everybody's honest feedback. We want to keep improving these events so that they're adding value to your lives. You know, generally we focus on practical philosophy. Tonight was more of a theoretical conversation, like I said from the beginning, but I find it intellectually interesting and fun and fascinating. And so I hope that other people have as well. I would love everybody's feedback, and please come to the next meeting. We'll have another one on Tuesday. Let me see if I know what's next Tuesday.
And also really quickly, there could be a possibility that people just never had a solid, agreeable definition of free will to begin with. And
Yeah.
that's why it's such an interesting, I don't want to say contentious. I always want to use the word interesting topic.
I think contentious is fair. It is contentious. I've had people get very mad at me over like debates on free will, and probably it was because I didn't handle it as well as I could have. I always look towards personal growth and development as like, how can we, how can I do better the next time? I don't remember what we have for next week, but we will have another event next Tuesday. So I would love for people to come, and I would love for you to all join the online community. I think Michael wanted some help in getting into the online community. So for anyone that wants to hang out, if they're having trouble getting into the online community, hang out, and I'll spend a few more minutes trying to get people in. And I just want to kind of close out for the recording's sake. And I want to thank you all for coming, for participating, for the really interesting conversation, the great comments. Really appreciate everyone's contributions tonight. And I had a great time. I hope you guys had fun too.
Okay, thank you. And the YouTube channel is on your page?
The YouTube channel is in the online community, and I don't know if it's in the meetup page, but it's in the online community under resources. And then if you can't find it, feel free to send me a message on Meetup and I'll send it to you. But if you go to YouTube and you search for Free Thinker Institute, it'll come right up.
Garrett, can you? I know you want to end the meeting. You got to go. Can you just leave it on, and whoever wants to stay can just hang out here for a while?
So let me see. What I would recommend is use the online community to continue the conversation, because I have to close it out so that I can save the recording.
Okay. Garrett, before you do that, I just want everyone to know that not everyone on Meetup has set their own Meetup profile to the ability which other people can send them private messages. And for those of you who don't know that, most people have the privacy setting that only hosts or organizers of groups that can send them like messages. So if I want to message Brent after you close this, there's no way I will be able to contact Brent privately if he doesn't have that on.
Thank you for letting me know that, Peter. I actually didn't know that. I thought everyone could message everyone. At least that's how it always was for me.
So one recommendation here is if we could go on today's Meetup page, like the main Meetup page where we RSVP'd, we can actually post comments on the comment section. And let's say, if you want to get together or something, like just post your name right there. And I'm willing to actually give my own free Zoom link. So every time when there's 3+ people on a Zoom, I don't have a license, so it's going to end every 40 minutes. But here's the catch. After every 40 minutes, it kicks you out, but you can click the same link to come back for free. Okay. Does that make sense, Brent?
Peter, we can contact each other easily simply by messaging each other.
Right, but if you don't have that enabled, it's going to say, I can't message you.
Of course. Well, yeah.
And I don't want to find that out the hard way after Gary closes this group.
Right.
So the place to continue the conversation is the online community. So let me post the link to that again and try to get you guys into it. I just posted it now. Everybody that
is it a Zoom? Is it like Zoom?
It's so actually that's a great question. It actually lets us do everything that Zoom does, because it lets you do video chat, voice chat. And so if you have 2 or 3 people like chatting in text, you can say, hey, let's jump into the voice chat room. You all jump into the voice chat room, you start voice chatting. If you want to add video, you can add video. So it does everything that Zoom does. It just does it like more at scale. And it's an ongoing, it's always there 24/7. And so you can have conversation anytime you want. So I love it. Now, the user experience is not what I would like it to be. Like, if they would hire me as a consultant, I could probably improve their user experience a little bit. But like right now, like it takes 2 weeks of like just figuring it out and playing with it and like being persistent. And so be persistent with it. Like once you spend a couple of weeks, and I can give you an intro. Like I tried to do a demo early on, and I might have been sharing the wrong screen when I did it. But this is the online community. Basically, this icon here. Can you see this Free Thinker Institute icon? See Free Thinker Institute here, or you see my email again? Hopefully not.
Okay, got it. So when I clicked on your link, it's asking me to accept. When I clicked accept invite, it's asking for my email, username, password, date of birth that I already provided when I created my account on
Yes,
Discord.
you lost password, Michael.
No, I did not. I provided it. And I was able to log in Discord on my computer, not on my phone, though.
Right.
And I don't know where to go. It just it
When
appears.
you log in, like when you click the link, it should have a lost password option. If you want to share your screen, I can walk you through it. And you can do a lost password option, and then you'll be able to get in.
I don't know how can I show my screen because
Hey, Garrett.
Yeah.
my screen is on my computer where I logged in Discord.
Hey, Brent, Brent, hang on a second. I'm gonna show Brent this. This is the RSVP list, right? And this is what I mean by what I was saying earlier.
Oh, I understand what you mean. You don't have to explain
Right.
it. I know what you mean. Most people are open for it.
Right, and I don't even see you on here, so there's no way for me to contact you.
Oh, I'm on there, I think, someplace.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'll contact you, Peter. I'll contact you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay. Bye, all.
So, Michael, I'm happy to walk you through how to do it. The problem is we advertise this event to multiple meetup groups, so not everybody's going to be in the same meetup group because we advertise it to like 8 or 9 meetup groups. So it just doesn't work to necessarily go through meetup, which is why we have the online community. So Michael, if you see at the bottom of the screen, there's a share screen. And if you want to click that, you can share your screen and then show me what you're seeing. And then I can walk you through how to get into
But Garrett, when I try to follow your link on my smartphone, which I am using for Zoom meeting, it also forced me to register and provide my information and create account basically. And then it asked me to install the app on my phone that I did not want to do. But then I tried to log in on my laptop, not on my phone.
Right.
Using my account. And it asked me to verify my email. And after that, I was able to log in. But what I see essentially is an empty screen with few links on top, like friends, online, all pending, whatever. And there is no way to access either our meeting or your articles that you mentioned or anything related to our meeting. So what was the point for creating this account? I don't understand.
So you should be able to log in from the account, Michael. You just have to say lost, like you have to log in with the username and password. If you log in, if you install the app on your phone and you install the app on your computer, it'll have a login, and whatever password you set, you'll log in with that username and password. And then if you log in.
Okay, so do I need to install the app? Otherwise, it's not accessible?
Yeah, so I don't know if there's a way to access it. I'll be right back. I don't know if there's a way to access it. I'm just grabbing my water. I don't know if there's a way to access it from I don't know if there's a way to access it from the web browser on your phone. I know there is on the computer, but like it's generally better to just use the app because the app is always there and easy, remembers your username and password. So it's much easier to use the app. So I generally recommend using the app.
Well, my laptop it's not a laptop. I don't think I can install the app, and I
Okay.
don't want to install it on my phone.
If it's like a work laptop, then you may not want to install it there. I wouldn't recommend that.
Right,
Yeah, so
right.
then I would just install it on your phone. And if you have a personal laptop, you can install it on that. For your work laptop, you could log into the web browser link, and you can log into Discord through a web browser on your laptop, and you could log in that way.
Is there any other way to access the articles that you mentioned?
So I can send them to you. If you want to put your email in the chat, I can email them to you.
Okay.
Send me their email.
Let me do this, because this was the main reason why I went through all these pains.
Yeah, if that's the main goal, I mean, like, I would love you to be in the online community because I think that it's fun to have smart people there, and you're a smart person. So I would love for you to be there. But, if you like, I would love for you to install it on your phone so that you can communicate with people. And I just love these kind of conversations, and I'm guessing you do too. And that's why you're here. And for those of us that do, be able to chat about this stuff on a regular basis, like when we have spare time, the online community, like with Discord, it's really good at, like, basically there's like, a couple dozen conversation topics. If something is said, since the last time you logged in a conversation topic, it appears in bold. And so you go to that bold one, when you click on it, it'll show you the last comment that you didn't see. And so it's very good at, like, keeping you up to date at, like, whatever you want, like what all the topics are that are going on and what's being conversed about. And then when you want to jump in, you just jump in and start talking. And if you're talking with 2 or 3 people at once, you can say, hey, let's chat in voice chat. And then you can jump into the voice chat and then start having a real-time conversation about that topic.
Anyway, I just sent you my email in the chat. And generally, I prefer communication via email than.
No problem. I'll send you an email with the papers. And someone else asked for it too. Here are the papers from this evening.
Hey, Garrett.
Yeah.
Are you, this is a little bit far out. It's on April 9th on Saturday. I've already asked another fellow member to see if they're interested, but apparently they have something going on. But because I think you've really hosted a really interesting topic today that I'm not sure, I think you might be interested in joining another free will event on April 9th, but I'm going to post it into the link.
Yeah,
that should take you to, it's another group, by the way, in case you're wondering. But if you're interested, go ahead and check it out, because I think you could also add your own perspectives.
Yeah, I would love to join if I'm able to. My Friday and Saturday nights are often food tech events, which is my basically job. I'm an entrepreneur in the food tech space. So, usually food events are people like Saturday and Friday nights. So, but it's 1 p.m. So that's
it's 1 p.m. EST. Should that work for you? Or
yeah, that would be fine.
Okay.
I'm free then.
What I'm trying to do personally, the reason I want to show you this, because I think, you're doing an interesting, fantastic job in hosting this, but also I've noticed that in a lot of debates in anything, in any context, what's going on is we actually don't have debates. People just sit in their own little echo chamber. And I think bringing people from multiple perspectives is good.
I agree. And I think that, and that's exactly what I was saying about combating confirmation bias, is I think confirmation bias is the enemy of the free world, quite frankly. Is we all like to think we already know all the answers, and we only accept information that agrees with our current beliefs. And that's not how we learn, right? To learn, we have to, like, listen with an open mind, which is one of, we say, like, we have what are called the 5 intentions in the Free Thinker Institute. And one of them is to listen with an open mind, as well as to be transparent about our beliefs. And if we listen with an open mind, with an eye toward seeking truth and personal growth and development, we're going to grow more, we're going to learn more about truth. And by listening with an open mind, we learn new truths. And I like to say, there's nothing wrong with admitting you're wrong, because if you admit you're wrong with good judgment, you're immediately right again. You're just more right than you were before. So I think people are too afraid to say that they're wrong, Whereas really admitting we're wrong with good judgment is a good thing, because now we're more right than we were before. And I think people don't think about it that way, and I wish more people would. So I try to.
And here's something you as the host and just anyone. This is the unfortunate truth of reality, is that we will we will never be able to know what other people's intentions are when they join any debates, right? Because some people join because they want to listen in, and they don't even like the topic. They're like, okay, seems interesting, right? By the end, just whatever. And then you have people that go like, I'm really willing to put the seed of doubt in my own mind if there are good ones. And then you have people that I personally just don't like, are the ones who take other perspectives except for their own, and to actually just for the sake of strengthening their own arsenal.
Right. And wait, say the last one again.
I'm sorry?
Say the last one again. Sorry.
So the last, from my personal experience, the last group of people who have the intentions to go into any meetings, and especially debates, is to really not truly hear out the other perspective, but what they're doing is to actually strengthening their own arsenal.
Yeah, and that's the confirmation bias, right? Is where you're listening to reaffirm your current beliefs rather than listening to understand, is what I try to call it, is listening to understand another person's perspective. And what I've learned to do, and hopefully you saw me do it tonight, is when someone says something that I don't get where they're coming from, which I did say multiple times, I don't get where you're coming from, I ask them questions about their own beliefs to like better understand where they're coming from, rather than to point out why they might be wrong in my perspective. Like, I may not even understand their beliefs. Why should I try to point out where they're wrong? But I think people do that really often, is if someone disagrees with them, they try to point out, look for a fault in what the other person said before they truly try to understand why they believe what they believe. And I think that we should be doing much more listening. And, I like this saying, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth. We should listen twice as much, as we talk. And, I think it's important to listen to other people's perspectives with an open mind, because, I also like to say there's over 7 billion other people in the world and only one of me. Why should I be focusing on what I want to say? Why should I not be listening to what other people want to say? Now, tonight I was presenting, so I probably talked more than, the average person, but like, that's because I've been studying this for over a decade, and so I'm trying to present a perspective, but hopefully I let other people talk quite a bit as well.
Yeah, and of course there are always the very few but unique kind of group of people who have the intention of going to meetings where they actually won't and never would like to take any stances on a certain subject. And I think those people are actually truly the interesting people, I guess.
Yeah, I don't mind taking a stance as long as I keep an open mind to, being wrong about that stance. And that's where I am with free will, right? Like, if someone proves me wrong tomorrow, I'm going to change my mind, because I would rather be more right than, be right today to, think that I'm right tomorrow about what I believe today, when actually logical evidence doesn't support it. I don't care about that. What I care about is truth. I care about learning the actual truth, not about being right. And when we value understanding the truth more than being right, is when we become more aligned with truth, in my opinion. And so that for me is what life is about. I like to say my favorite things to do are to learn and to teach. And so that's what I try to spend most of my focus be on, is learning and teaching. And so if we focus on learning about truth, and then teaching what we think is true, but letting everybody question and debate it, if someone proves us wrong, then suddenly we're more right. And for me, that's what life's about.
Yeah. I'm just glad that nobody here, including all the audiences, no one had said this is a fallacy, by the way. No, I'm glad this did not happen in this meeting, but some people think, sometimes we just gotta agree to disagree. Or another one, I think it's even worse.
Someone did say that. Yeah.
Let's find a middle ground, because finding a middle ground in every conversation is actually a fallacy in itself. Because some topics don't really have a middle ground. Like, for example, I know this sounds really contentious, but since we're already at the end, I'll just prove my point a little bit, right? For, let's say, the A word, the abortion, no matter how you do it, it's a loss of life. There's no gray area in there. Well, if you look at it from the biological standpoint, but for the reasons being why that happens now, that is very gray. So I hope you understand my point. There are certain things that are just no gray area. If you shoot someone in the head, they're dead, right? You can't say like, well, technically he's probably half in heaven, half on the earth. Like, no.
So actually, I have an interesting take on abortion, which I don't know if I want to do, but because we're going to close out, I'll share it with you. Is I believe that first of all, you said it's life, and sure. So you can argue that like life may begin at conception, but you can also argue that all of the bacteria in our gut is alive and it's life, but we kill billions of them a day. And yet I don't cry over killing gut bacteria, right? And so there's life and then there's meaningful life. And what I would argue is sentient life for me is what's meaningful life. Life that has free will is what's meaningful life. And so what I would argue is that when an unborn baby has sentience, it becomes, sacred life and meaningful life. And it becomes bad to kill, sentient life, because to me, sentient life is, its own person, at that point, because it's making non-deterministic decisions. It has an essence of itself, what I call a spirit, what religions call a soul. And so for me, that's when life becomes meaningful. Now, there are different arguments about when does life become sentient. I used a bunch of actually pro-life websites, and basically from what I could tell, life becomes sentient in the third trimester, according to the pro-life websites. And so for me, performing an abortion after the third trimester is, murder. And yet before that, like, that life is kind of deterministic life. And for me, it's not, it's not sacred life at that point. And that's the argument that I make on the paper on abortion. But that's I don't know if I want.
I personally, in the recent years, I've actually convinced myself I told myself to never talk about abortion, no matter how sound the arguments are from both or multiple sides, or even if it takes place, let's say in Harvard or Oxford University, like a very professional setting, I will never participate as someone who speaks. Like, I can listen as an audience. And here's what I'm telling you. Here's why I promised myself to never participate in the A-word debate in my life, because I've heard way too many times that men should just have no say. And when I hear that, I just automatically go like, there's some truth to it. And so
I don't know. I don't know that I agree with that, because at the end of the day, like, a baby is born from two parents, and the baby should be cared for by two parents if it's born. And so to me, like, a baby is not a one person decision, and the woman definitely carries the baby, but, I'm a dad, I love my daughters like crazy. And, I don't think that my wife has more of an authority of being a parent than I do, because she bore them. Like, I'm still the dad, right? And I'm still an equal parent, and my wife treats me as an equal, and I appreciate that. And luckily, we generally agree about how to raise our kids. But, like, I don't think that it's a one person decision. It's really two people. It takes two people to have a baby. And so two people should be deciding on what happens
Sure. But where it gets really complicated, right, Garrett, is that when people ask, okay, Peter, so how do we determine who makes, if it's a 50-50, right? Let's say, wife and husband, right? They have like abort, not abort, okay? And when people ask me this question, I just truly don't know how to answer, because I just don't, okay? And it's like, but Peter, who's going to be the tiebreaker?
Right.
That's really difficult. So,
I didn't think about this. Someone asked this question the other day, is whether or not men should have a right to, like, whether or not the baby is going to be aborted. And I mean, I kind of shared with you my perspective on whether or not I think abortion is murder, and when I think it is and when it's not. And I guess I would say that in the third trimester, I don't think abortion should be allowed unless to save the life of the mother, because the life of the mother is a well-established life. The life of a baby is an unborn life. And so I think to save the life of the mother, it seems justifiable to me, because the mother could potentially have more babies at a future date. But anyway, but then, the question of, like, who gets to decide, to me, it's like, who's going to take care of the baby? And the fact of the matter is, it's usually the mom that takes care of the baby in the situations where there may or may not be an abortion. So in those cases, yeah, the mom should be deciding. But what if the dad says, I want to care for this baby for the rest of my life, and that baby is the most important thing to me, and I'm going to care for it, and take care of it. And, you know, I don't care if the mom doesn't want it, I want the baby. But does the man have no right to say that? And I don't think it's fair to say that just because the woman biologically is the one carrying the baby, that the man has no right to have an opinion. So I haven't thought about it deeply, so I don't have a well-formulated opinion yet. I need to think more about it.
Yeah. Well, the truth is, the more real life the topic is, the more contentious it becomes. And free will is something that I think is more intriguing than contentious, because this is just
It's
my
very
opinion on this. But
I've
let me tell you
stop
why I
talking to
think
me
free
from
will
it.
is not.
So
Here's why I don't think free will is that contentious, even if, you know, even if someone attacks all my points. Here's why. Because at the end of the day, let's say, okay, literally everyone here but myself, let's say, is against, everyone here but myself is for free will. When I leave the meeting, I won't be pissed off in the slightest, because that has no bearing on the obligations I have to do in life. You know, I gotta go to work, I gotta go to work, I gotta sleep, I gotta go to sleep. This is just one event that happened in life. So I don't really look at any debates really with that serious of issue. Yeah. And with that, I want to kind of summarize my overall point is that, you know, let's say, and I'm not claiming this, but let's say, even if science can one day prove that free will does not exist in every dimension, or including quantum mechanics, something along the lines of that, I still don't think it would be, this is just the way I'm going to explain why I'm saying this. I don't personally think it would be wise for the scientific community, or whatever community that eventually discovers that free will is not real with 100% accuracy. It's still not a good idea, even in that stage, to just broadcast that around the world. Because if there's one thing I think I tend to do agree with you, Garrett, absolutely and wholeheartedly, from the beginning of your slide you were showing on Google Docs, was that if enough people believe that there is no free will, we can truly have a chaotic world. Because some people will fall into fatalism, and some people go like, well, if I'm not going to get punished for my actions, why not kill someone? Or why should I do anything good if I'm not getting awarded? And so on.
It's if everything that I want to do was fated to be done, then I can do the most horrendous, horrible things, you know, child rape, serial murder. Like, I could do the most horrible things, but it's not my fault. I'm not responsible. I just had to do it. And therefore they can justify and rationalize any unethical behavior. Now, you can also justify any ethical behavior. The problem with determinism is you can justify anything, because anything you did had to have been done. And therefore, you know, it is chaos. And so I think it's a very impractical philosophy. And that's why even the people who believe in determinism don't really believe in determinism. They believe in acting like we have free will, even though they think we don't. And so for practical purposes, like, the concept of determinism is a very impractical philosophy to follow, because you literally, it's, you know, it's very impractical to follow for all those reasons. So that said, I do need to go, because I'm fading. I'm extremely tired, and I normally wake up at 4 or 5, and I did today. So it's way past my bedtime at this point. And so
okay, yeah, appreciate it. Thank you for the meeting.
Thank you guys for coming. Really appreciate you, and please come to the online community. Would love to chat with you guys there, and I'll try to make the conversation on free will. Thanks a lot, everybody. Bye-bye.